host, sabrinasalvati.
All right. Welcome to Sabs podcast. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. My special guest tonight is Jasmine Sherman. Jasmine is running for president as an independent for 2024. Jasmine, thank you so much for joining me tonight.
Thank you for having me. Oh my gosh. And I loved your intro. I saw so many people that I actually do know. Especially recently, I saw Afeni up there. She is so awesome. Have you heard her speak?
Yeah. Afeni was a part of RBN. So yeah, she's great. She's awesome. But I want to get started discussing your campaign. So you're running for president as an independent. First and foremost, why did you decide to run for president?
So I do not appreciate how there are people who are living in this country without housing, healthcare, education. I work in Charlotte, North Carolina for a nonprofit that I own to provide people who are houseless with resources. And when I contacted our city to buy an old jail to convert it into housing, they wouldn't sell it to me. They wanted to sell it to a developer. Then I contacted our city council and our county commissioners about, okay, you don't want to sell me the jail, sell me this old school. They wouldn't sell me that either. And finally, I went to the mayor, the governor, and no one wanted to end houselessness in Charlotte, North Carolina. And the fastest way for me to end houselessness in this country is to run for president and write an executive order to do so.
Awesome. Yeah, we've talked about the housing issue.
It sounds old.
Yeah, we've talked about the housing issue a lot on this show. I want to bring up your website here. So it says, Jasmine Sherman for president, let's reset. And I want to go to your platform here. And so I like a lot of the policies that you laid out. And one of the first one that I saw here was a disability policy. Can you talk a little bit about that? Why did you decide to put that on your platform? Because right now I think you're the only candidate that has a policy in reference to disability.
So the problem is we have a society that has a whole population of people that are left out and disenfranchised. Some of the people who are suffering the greatest abuses in our country are the disabled. And people do not understand that the disabled are not just people who are visibly disabled in a wheelchair, or like disability looks very different on different people. But we need to go ahead and provide an environment that is conducive for all of our citizens. And so that means that we need wheelchairs that fit every size. We need to make sure that things are accessible. Right now, when you walk around, there are neighborhoods that do not have sidewalks. And because people who are disabled are disenfranchised this way, they suffer the most abuses. And so I am going to acknowledge that I do have mobility issues of my own. So it is, something that I also think is important. But a lot of the people that I have been working with, they need this to survive. And we need to make sure that people are okay.
That's right. So this is one of the issues I think oftentimes is overlooked, is the disability issue. And I'm glad you brought up the fact that not everyone has a physical disability. So this idea that you can just look at someone and tell whether or not they're disabled, that's actually not true. You mentioned wheelchairs. I had a friend who used to work with medical equipment. And one of the things that she brought to my attention is how expensive wheelchairs are, and the mobile scooters that you guys may see sometimes. If you go to the grocery store, you may see people using a mobile scooter. Those scooters not only are very expensive, but they're also very difficult to get, whether you qualify for it or not. So she opened my eyes to a lot of these issues. But I love the fact that you do have a policy in reference to disability, because I do feel like oftentimes this is a group of people that are often forgotten about.
But because they're forgotten about, this impacts our children's education as well, right? So disabilities, there are children that are disabled, and because we don't have the resources and proper funding, they are also being harmed. And so their disability is being compounded because we have not addressed children's disabilities either. A lot of my platform, just to be transparent, a lot of my platform, the reason it's called Let's Reset is we have to go ahead and fix a bunch of stuff. Quick, I'm gonna watch my mouth. We have to fix a bunch of things together. A lot of my programs are layered in, right? That's the only way that we will get this. So we have to fix disability, but because we're fixing people's disability issues, we have to make sure we fix education, right? And because we're fixing education, and disability, we have to fix the infrastructure. So that means that, like, sidewalks and those things, those are all a requirement of that. It's all very much interlocked. As we started digging into one thing, we found another thing, and they're all intersect.
Yeah, I want to mention that this is important for people to understand. One of the schools that I actually used to do my volunteering with when I was, especially when I was starting to go into like the clinical assessment for my graduate program, one of the schools that I did my observations at actually did not have a ramp or any type of wheelchair access to the school. It was an old building in Boston. They never upgraded it for people who may have to have a ramp to get into the building, people who use a wheelchair. So if you have any type of physical handicap where you are wheelchair bound, you have no way of entering that building because you have to walk up a flight of steps just to get in through the front door. So that's not uncommon with some of these older buildings here in places like New England, but those are the kind of things that need to change. And that is a part of infrastructure. So you're right. They all do intersect. Another policy you have here is public utility conversion policy. Can we talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So I do not think the average American in 2024, 2025, 2023 should be paying utility bills. We have enough technology to provide people with water and electricity and Wi-Fi, because that is also a utility now, for free. Right? The taxpayers have already invested all of this money into the infrastructure. And what we did was we took taxpayer money and then gave it to corporations to profit off of. There is no reason that we are still charging people for utility bills, especially as the water isn't clean, the electricity isn't reliable in some places. In Appalachia, they don't even have the internet. Like, these are things that have to be fixed. And the best way to do that is to stop relying on local government that clearly has not taken care of all our citizens. I saw in your chat, someone commented, we were talking about the disability in Boston. When I lived in Dorchester, there's a walk up. I lived on a three-floor walk up. You know what I'm saying? The power would go out. There's no wheelchair access. There's no elevator. These are all things that we have to fix. And charging people utilities is how we stop them from having air conditioning when it's hot, how we stop them from using their heat when it's cold. Eliminating those bills will go ahead and provide everyone with the same kind of comfort. We are getting to a place where if you are someone that doesn't acknowledge climate change, I can't help you. But if everybody else is paying attention, our planet is getting hotter. We have
Yep.
record heat. People are passing away from that. And because people are more concerned of, if I have to pay my utilities, I can't buy groceries. So let's just make sure we put it in our taxes and call it a day and cover it for people.
Yeah. So the state of Maryland, for those who are not aware, my dad was telling me about this years ago. They actually started to make it illegal to basically, turn off someone's heat in the winter for non-payment, because what was happening is you had senior citizens who were living off of their social security check and it wasn't enough to pay the heating bill sometimes. So they were like, just they would die in their home. So this is a big issue in reference to when we talk about utilities. Like, a lot of people don't understand that. Environment and infrastructure policy. Let's talk a little bit about this one.
So we have to completely revamp our infrastructure and our environment. I don't know where everybody's from, but I do know that everybody knows that there are potholes where they live. There are roads that are cracked. There are sidewalks that are either unbuilt or unkempt. That's part of our infrastructure. Instead, what we need to do is go ahead, because I did talk about, this is my environmental plan. What our goal is, in places that don't have sidewalks, we're going to go ahead and install sidewalks with kinetic pads. So that helps to generate that energy that we were talking about for the public free utilities, right? By doing that, that helps us. By not relying on fossil fuels anymore, there are natural AC methods that countries within the continent of Africa are already using to keep people cool. We have better technology. Unfortunately, our government has not chosen to invest in us locally or federally to provide for our safety or our infrastructure. I grew up in New York and Boston a little bit, and people would fall through potholes, people fall through grates, and then they would be stuck. Now they have no way to get around, right? So we have to fix our environment. It's like, I don't know how you guys felt about that rolling cloud that came from Canada because of the fires, but that's not
Yep.
safe. That's not healthy. That's coming because our planet is getting hotter, right? We have other technologies. One of the things that we are going to be doing when I'm elected is putting in a rail system from the East Coast to the West Coast. That policy isn't there yet because we are not done with the models about how to do that and legally do that, because you have to take the old Amtrak rails. But once that is done, that policy will be up there as well. We have to do something to keep our planet cooler and provide people with access. Another big thing about our infrastructure policy is because we'd be federally funding this, we would go back to mixed walkable neighborhoods. A lot of people don't live in places where they can go and get all of their needs met in their community, and it's hurting us. It's stopping us from building a community because we're not connected.
That's right. You're right. 100% correct about that. Abolish the police policy. So this is one that we've talked about often on RBN. Nick is a part of 10 Demands for Justice, and he talks about the road to abolition. Let's get a little bit into this one, because I think when some people hear abolish police, particularly those who have property and those who are tend to be a lot older than us, they get a little bit concerned. Let's talk a little bit about abolish the police.
So what we've done is abolish the police. That line item would go to zero, no more funding for it. And we would be paying people to participate in their own community task force. Everybody has that one nosy neighbor who knows everything about what's going on better than anybody else. Why pay a stranger who doesn't live in that zip code when we could pay the people who live in that community to police that community? You know all the kids in that community. You will never have a mistake of, what are you doing here? If you don't live here, you shouldn't be policing here. And for people who are like, well, what about the cops? They can go and work on their own community task force within their own zip codes. But we need to make sure we get to a place where we, one, stop this senseless killing of innocent people, because cops were never supposed to be judge, jury, and executioner. And that's what's happened. We can no longer. That culture is so toxic. We must abolish the police and put the power in the citizens' hands.
Jasmine, what happened
And
to
it saves us money because we're not paying for it.
Is neighborhood watch no longer a thing? When I was growing up, there used to be neighborhood watch, but I don't see those signs that much anymore.
So George Zimmerman was neighborhood watch, right? So that's kind of like, so that it does exist, but not like that. This is what we're talking, like when we talk about a community task force, we're talking about you're going out with a social worker automatically on calls. You are the individual in your community. It shouldn't be that hard. And this is going to sound bad, but we all do understand how to talk to our drunk neighbor, right? Come on, Joe, you do this like that kind of thing. But the difference here is you're not just dropping Joe in a drunk take. Now you're taking Joe home. And then when we contact Joe on 2 days from now, hey, you had an incident the other night. We've got to talk about that. We go to a restorative justice policy. Why is Joe getting drunk? Why is he acting like that? What is missing? A lot of times people go, I just want justice. I just want to lock them up. You talked about elderly people being concerned, but what is this happening, right? If we eliminate poverty, a lot of the crime goes away. If we provide people with universal health care for mental health treatment, now they have access, right? And so part of our abolish police policy relies on giving people the skills they need to be a successful community. We have to go from trying to punish people and get revenge, because that is not working. We have enough data to show it's not a deterrent and it isn't helping. But other countries, other people who have different methods of helping to keep people safe have found that there are better ways of doing it. And we would just be adopting what the data shows works.
So this next one here was pretty shocking to me. We're going to use the term assault because it's YouTube. Anti-legalized child assault policy. I didn't even know this was a thing.
So not only is it a thing, this policy now has to be expanded. I do not know if you have done your research on cults, but I did tell you I have a nonprofit. I deal with houselessness. I deal with children that are trafficked. One time a woman came and she was like, I just escaped my pimp. They have my child. We called the police. Not that I like to work with them, but we needed to get this woman her child. And the police tried to arrest this victim, my client, for being a prostitute. And I'm sorry, can I say that on YouTube? I'm so sorry. A sex worker, instead of worrying about the child. Children in this country are swapped on Facebook, on napkins. Like, you just have to say, I'm a parent, I'm signing them over, and you do. We must make it. If you are not old enough to vote, you are not old enough to get married. This should no longer be a thing, because a child of 12 cannot consent. And we have a big problem with cults in our country under religion, where a child at 12 is considered an adult. And so this
Okay, that
policy does need to be expanded.
okay, that kind of reminds me of Waco. That kind of reminds
It's
me
worse than
of
Waco.
Waco.
Yeah, it's Waco, it's ATI, it's IBPL. It's a lot of these religious groups that are marrying children off. And I will be candid. I was a foster child in Boston. I didn't get my first SA until I went to foster care. And I want to ensure that that doesn't happen to any other human in our country.
Mhm.
It's you, if you listen to these stories, it is gross. And not to be funny, Massachusetts is a state where it is okay at 12. It's still on the
Mm.
books with parental consent. So I'm gonna get some water. Sorry about that. I have a real problem with that. And so that is why, because of this, we also need to gut the foster care and the adoption system as well. Like, that's why I say it's a my slogan and policy is let's reset, because we know all the cracks. We have the technology to track everything that has gone wrong. This is our time to redo it. Do a whole new social contract in this country, one that is inclusive and protects everyone.
Well said, Jasmine. Well said. Now we get into the foster care and adoption policy. So this is the again, like, you're the first person I've seen so far that has this on their platform. And this is a huge issue because for people who are just not aware, not everyone who's a foster parent actually wants to be a parent. Some parents will sign up to be a foster parent just to get the money from the state and then not even spend the money on that child. And yes, there are social
Correct.
workers who come to visit the house to check on the child, but all the parent has to do is to put enough fear in the child not to speak out about what they're doing to them or how they're neglecting them. And of course, they are in a position of authority. So the child is going to fear the parent. They also don't want to be put back into the system again and have to go somewhere else that could be even worse than where they are now. But this is a misstepped a lot of times by social workers, because from what I understand, these visits usually are, I think, announced, or they can prepare for these. It's not
Correct.
like they're showing
The
up
visit,
like out of the blue.
correct. And they don't do surprise checks. But I want to be fair. The social workers do not have the capacity. They're overworked and underpaid, right? Like,
Mm.
as much of the blame is on them, much of it is not. It's on the system itself. When it comes to the foster care problem, I think what we have to acknowledge is we do not have sex education in this country, not one that's consistent across the board. And so a child who is in a foster home, if it's normal, right? Like, I was a child that grew up with my parents spanked me. It wasn't until after I went into foster care, I was like, oh, people don't spank their kids. A kid does not know what is not normalized. So even if you're in foster care, if depending on how young that child is, that child doesn't know why they're in foster care, right? Like, I went to foster care because my dad was a drug dealer, not because of child. Like, they did add child abuse later, but so sometimes the kids don't even know what it is to communicate that to their social worker. So like, it's a terrible thing, but it is normalized. It is something that you don't understand, and then other kids are your peer pressures. Like, this is what we do to survive. You know what I'm saying? I think we have to make space for social workers to do their job, but we also have to provide our potential victims with
Mm. Well said. Well said. Yeah, that one is a huge, huge issue. There was a girl when I was in high school. One of my classmates was actually in a group home, and we didn't know that for the longest time until one day she came to class like just crying because she couldn't take it anymore because she told us about what was happening to her in the group home. And I just thought to myself, like, wow, like no one should have to go through this. Decriminalize sex work policy. This is another big issue, I think, that in some countries this is legal, but not so much in the United
it's
States. Let's
legal
talk a
here
little bit about
depending on
this.
so it's legal here depending on the bylaws that you follow. So like in Connecticut, you can do it at a bar, right? Like, every state has their own thing, but it's called something specific. And in New York, there was an issue with police officers who had to be told they can no longer have SA with the women that they were arresting for doing this by decriminalizing, because we had all of these policies. We interviewed professionals, people within the industry, doctors, everybody to give us, plus lawyers, lots of lawyers, to help us write these policies. And we met with sex workers and they told us what they needed. And decriminalization is the best way to free them from oppressive exploitation, provide them with health care and safety, and stop again law enforcement from abusing them. After you get abused by someone else, it's very easy for someone else now to prey upon you. Another
Right.
thing that I will be doing that is not there is we are going to test every SA kit in the United States of America. That is going to be a prime objective. We need to know who is safe, who is not safe, and then begin to get their victims the support that they need.
Well, something I never really understood, why is it okay or why is it legal for someone to be a porn star, for example, to get paid for having sex, but it's not nationally, it's not legal for someone to be uh a call girl or something like that. I never
Right. So
understood
a
that.
lot of we have a lot of blue laws on the books, right? So when porn like got really big, it was only in California and New York for the filming, right? Those states that were liberal and took those blue laws off the books. Depending on where you live right now in the United States, living with a person that you're not married to could get you arrested. And I would like to tell people, do not sleep on those blue laws, because currently, under the whole guise of removing an individual who carries children, reproductive freedom, they are trying to enact a law from 150 years ago. So those are very important, and that's how you got it. And so once we had the internet and things like that, they just started to make pornography much easier to have access to.
Mhm.
But when they did open those theaters, people were arrested in the red light district of New York and in California originally. Harry
Interesting.
Flint was arrested several times.
That's interesting. Tax policy and plan. So this is a biggie. I think a lot of us don't like
This one is a
like
biggie.
high
It's like
taxes.
it's like 36 pages, but it's actually very simple. This one's like a 10-minute explanation, but less. In a Sherman administration, if you make under $40,000, you will not pay taxes. You would also no longer be doing your own taxes. It would be done quarterly by your employer, because they're the people that snitch on you anyway, right? Like the government knows you owe, they already know, right? So why make you do it? Right now they do it because we have deals with TurboTax, we have deals with H&R Block, and I have to tell you, corporations are not my priority. People are. So let's go ahead and eliminate potential for tax fraud by stopping and allowing people to do their own taxes. We switch from a Hayek model where to a Keynesian model, which means that we are going to put the money in the hands of the public, which is why we also provide them with universal basic income as well. But if you make under $40,000, you would not pay taxes. If you click on it, there is a chart that shows people exactly where they fall. There's no exceptions. Taxes are not done as a family anymore. It's an individual one-for-one situation.
Interesting. And then
There,
the only
there you.
question I have, the only
There
question I
used to be a
have
chart in
in
there.
reference, the only question I have in reference to this that I think some people are going to ask, what about people that are self-employed?
People that are self-employed will be given access to the Social Security website. Will they be able to file those for free? Because the self-employed person is still a company. They would be doing it because that's not them being an individual. That's them being a corporation. So they would be doing their business tax for their employees, i.e. them. But we would provide them with the software to do it.
Okay. Social Security policy.
So this one, I'm not going to get a lot of fans here. I am eliminating Social Security for anyone that is not disabled.
Oh,
because
dear.
it takes money out of the pockets of the young to halfway support the elderly. But again, my platform is housing, healthcare, and education. So people who are no longer getting Social Security will be getting universal basic income, which is more than they're currently
Okay.
receiving on Social Security.
Interesting. Interesting. Some of us may not get Social Security anyway, like to be honest, by the time we're
Correct. Which is
of
why
age.
correct. Which is why, because it is cheaper, it is more expensive, not cheaper. It is more expensive to be disabled. We would not be cutting off SSDI for people with disabilities. But when you apply for disability, you would get it on the first try. No more letting people die waiting for them to apply 3 or 4 times.
So the only thing I will say in reference to replacing this with a UBI is that for elderly people that are retired, that UBI isn't going to go as far for them as it would for someone who's employed.
What do you mean? Because it's not determined by your age. wage, it's determined by where you live, and it's based on the index of where you are. So as things change, if Walmart raises their prices, they have to raise their wages, which means that we'd have to raise the universal basic income. What we have to stop doing is have a minimum wage and have an index living wage that fluctuates.
That's interesting. What about the universal healthcare policy?
It includes dental, vision, mental health care, and respite care. If you open that policy, you will see that there is a link in there to takes you to a spreadsheet. The spreadsheet lets you see all of the way, it lets you see all of the programs that we are going to be closing to pay for this policy. What we have to do is put a health facility in every zip code. Every zip code. Right now, there are people who live in the United States in counties that have no hospitals. None. And not to be funny, we do not have the same kind of care. If you got hurt in Boston, you would feel very different versus if you get hurt in Alabama. And
That's
that's
true.
not okay. We have to have a standard of living that is fair. If I get hurt in Easter peepee, I want to make sure that I'm still going to be okay. And right now we don't have that.
That is true. I
But
think
we
people have
do.
to understand, especially those that live in like rural areas. Like there are rural areas in this country that don't have hospitals anymore. The hospitals have closed, or there are some that do have hospitals, but the hospitals are not to the same quality as hospitals here in Massachusetts. And everybody should have that same quality. You shouldn't have to live in Massachusetts to have a good doctor. I mean, that's kind of how I look at it. Um,
I agree. Because, like, not to be funny, I travel. I don't want to be getting hurt.
Right. And I think, this is a big one. I think at this point it's a no-brainer because obviously Bernie Sanders ran on this. A lot of people are very passionate about universal health care. Everybody needs to have health care in this country. Guaranteed
But
housing
I'm the only
policy.
candidate that I just want to say though, I'm the only candidate that is including dental and vision in my universal healthcare policy. Sorry.
Yeah, that's it's like it shouldn't even have to be said. Like it shouldn't even have to say, oh, by the way, when we say universal health care, by the way, we mean dental
But
and vision as well. Like that's also health care.
but Medicare does not cover those things. Medicare only covers a couple of prescriptions and a couple of visits to the doctor. We would be covering with my universal health care, we're covering mind and body, your teeth, your mental health. Mental health is something that we put directly in school systems to make sure that everyone is getting mental health care. So sorry.
Awesome. And the guaranteed housing policy.
Yes. So this one is going to make some people upset, and I'll just go ahead and say it. I would be writing an executive order to use eminent domain, and we would be paying people who currently already own their houses, whatever the eminent domain law is in their county. Now, for people who are like, you can't do that, there is no case that the federal government has ever lost is buying everyone's home in the United States of America, giving the land back to the indigenous tribes that owned that before colonization, allowing them to be the stewards, and people who are in the domicile, the physical building, would remain or relocate. And when I say relocate, like people move, your family grows. You would use an app like Airbnb. You would log into it. You would select where you want to live, and you would live there for a minimum of 6 months or wherever. If you don't want to move, you don't have to move. You could die right where you are. But this is going to make sure that we can upgrade everyone's housing, stop charging people to live, and provide shelter for everyone within our borders. No one would pay rent. No one would pay mortgage. You already pay your taxes, so it covers it. There are more houses on the market than there are houses. Go ahead.
What if you already own the house? What if you've already paid your house off?
We're paying. Yeah. We pay you the money that you would get back under the eminent domain laws where you live. That is your money to do whatever you want. And then you would stay in your house. The reason we know that it will work is because we're not requiring anyone to move. We're not kicking you out of your home, and we're paying you back for the money you invested. This allows us to take every single person off the street, and it's already working in other countries, more Slavic countries.
So I think I'm a little bit confused just because does this mean that people, when you say the land would be given to someone else, so then
the indigenous community. So if you bought a stolen car,
right.
So I think what this I'm sorry. This requires you to have an understanding of how land back works, right? There is a movement within the indigenous community in the United States to get land back. We would give them their land back. If you bought a stolen car, the police would come and tell you you can't keep that car, right? We're not displacing you. You're not removed from the home, but you are not going to be able to pour toxic chemicals down your driveway anymore. If your house needs to be upgraded, you would contact us and it would be done for you. This is the easiest way to make sure that everyone has housing and good quality housing, not putting people in projects. Houses are paid off.
Well,
And yes, it does eliminate property taxes. No more property taxes.
how would you prevent companies like BlackRock who have bought up a lot of these homes?
Now that's different. They're not individual people, so the law doesn't require me to treat them the same. They owe us money. And I will use my triple bottom line accounting policy when you get to it, because we're going back 37 years to get our money. Yeah. So corporations are going to pay what they owe the American public. Since Reagan, they have had too much fun at our expense.
I hear you on that one. Accessible medical equipment, service dogs in the States.
Yes, people who are disabled do not get a service dog. It takes too long.
Mm-hmm.
So this is just to make sure that we provide for them. It also means that we have to treat animals better. Sentient beings are no longer going to be subjected to corporal punishment.
Yeah, this is another service that's really hard to get, you guys. Like, it's not easy to get a service dog, just FYI. I know other people that have tried to get them, and it's a big thing. Reparations policy, 40 acres and a mule.
Yeah. Yeah. So what's happening with the reparations policy, if you match the phenotype and genotype of people who were slaves on this land, you will have the ability to get $192,000. It's paid out in $4,000 increments. The money doesn't come from taxes. The money comes from decriminalization and cannabis sales, which is covered under your universal healthcare policy. So as long as you eat them treats and smoke them smokes, you will be helping to pay for the atrocities that this country has never answered for. We will also be providing people with their genealogy. I don't know where I'm descended from. And I don't mean 23andMe. There is actually something far more better that is produced on the continent of Africa to tell people where they're from. We would also be providing plantations. We would be turning those into communities for people who are descended as well.
What about land in reference to Adas
The
group?
land's
What
not
about
ours.
land? The land's not ours?
Nope, land is not ours. It goes back to the land goes back to the indigenous community. It was theirs first before colonization.
Some people might disagree with I'm just like, some people might disagree because of the Black Wall Street.
I want to be clear. Like, I want to be clear, right? My whole platform could potentially get me killed. I'm talking about giving away housing. I'm talking about giving away healthcare. I am following a different pattern of getting on ballots, which I am successful at. Everything I'm doing, people are going to have pushback. You either want the status quo or you don't. What we are doing with the way that we are campaigning is we are not trying to talk to people who are actually already vote. We are tackling the population that does not vote. We are tackling the population that is poor. We are tackling those people. And those people care more about getting their needs met because they don't own anything. If you look at the data, only 46% of Americans actually own their homes.
Yeah.
4% free and clear. And if you mess up and don't pay your property taxes, you won't own anything. So I feel like, and the older generation really, really liked owning land, right? Because that's all the police protect is property, but it was stolen and we have to give it back. In regard to Black Wall Street, we still were not indigenous to this nation, right? It wasn't ours. It was stolen. The Tulsa massacre, all of those things that happened, atrocities. But that land was stolen property. It isn't saying you can't live on it, but people actually just need to learn more about the indigenous community and learn what land back means. It isn't something that hurts us. It's actually something that's going to protect our environment and give us a better way of living. Right now in the United States, we don't have fruit producing trees, right? We have an entire huge pollen problem because we don't have fruit producing trees, right? Those types of things could be prevented with land back. We can start fixing our concrete jungles and turning them into vertical jungles.
Yeah, I know one of the big the way the land has been misused and abused. We talked about the pipelines on the show that have been put through multiple communities. So it's a big issue. And then of course, universal basic income. I see
Yes,
two
if you click
thousand
in that, people
dollars.
no, you should click in that. That's just explaining to you how the math works. So if you click in that, you can see everybody's state. You can see what people in Boston would get. I know Hawaii gets like $4,000, and the state that gets the least is Mississippi because it's like the poorest. And this is just how the math is worked out for people that
Oh,
live in
yeah.
Massachusetts. Mhm.
I see what you mean because it's based on that makes sense. That makes sense. So you guys notice it's higher in some other states because the cost of living in.
Correct. Correct.
Very, very interesting. Very interesting. And the other one I wanted to go to is foreign policy. This is a big one with a lot of people that watch this show. What's your position in reference to foreign policy and war and imperialism?
I don't have time for imperialism. I got to fix America. And I'm only going to give you guys one term. So just to be true, right? My foreign policy is a lot close to what the Swiss have. America will be exporting doctors, we'll be exporting medicine, we'll even export food. We are not sending checks and we are not sending weapons. We are no longer propping that up. We will be closing all of the bases around the world as part of a renegotiation for all of our trade deals. We must come into the global market as not a white supremacist superpower, but as a group of people that want to work with our global community. I'm not talking isolationism. What I'm talking about is we're going to stop putting our nose where we don't belong. We're going to fix our problems at home. We're going to bring our troops back. Should somebody do something to us in the US, I have no problem raining bombs and terror and fighting. I've been fighting all my life. That's not an issue. But we don't need to be there starting shit. We need to be here fixing our country.
Interesting. And triple bottom line accounting policy.
Yes, that's what I was talking about, how I'm gonna get my money from companies like BlackRock. And I don't just mean my money, I mean y'all money. But that's how we are going to get your money back. The companies only care about their bottom line. They only care about their profit. But now their profit is how many per workers did you hurt? Amazon owes us a bunch of money. They killed 6 people a couple years ago with letting people go home in a tornado. They didn't pay, they didn't get shut down. Nothing happened to them. Nobody went to jail. They just sent them a $20,000 check and they let it go. So that would be something that would hurt their bottom line. We would also, are you doing damage to the environment? We are going to chalk that up on your bill as well. That's how we do it. And that explains it. And we're going back 37 years.
Immigration.
We need to go back to a policy. If you want to be here, I want you to be here. This is stolen land, stolen people. We don't have time to keep people out. If they want to be here, I want them to be here. We used to process people on Ellis Island in 7 hours. We could do it in 1.
How would you deal with the issue in reference to immigration, in reference to the immigration process, like how long it takes for someone to even become a citizen in this
No.
country?
An hour. When it was white people immigrating, it took 7 hours. They got the name changed and they went through. If they were sick, they were held on Ellis Island until sickness was gone. But that's it. You get a doctor's visit, make sure you're healthy, you get your paperwork, and you go on about your business. And we give you housing. This does not have to be that complicated. It's only complicated when we want to be greedy, hateful, and bigots.
All right. Death penalty policy.
Yeah, so we would put you to death in 365 days. I'm not a pacifist.
No, I'm sorry. The death penalty policy. What do you mean? Are you for or?
I'm for death penalty. If you harm people, we need to eliminate you. I am for abolishing prisons, but let me explain. So I personally have been in 3 mass shootings. I've been shot twice. Anybody who will go into a crowd of people with a weapon and open fire, they don't need to be amongst us. I do not have any sympathy for that. And I would say that not everybody has to agree with all the candidates on every issue that they have. The death penalty isn't going away under any of the other current candidates.
But what happens if you're abolishing the police? Who makes this decision whether or not someone's going to
Your
be put to
community.
death?
So you would need to read the restorative justice policy that's in the abolish police policy. It is all in there.
And what if it's someone that's actually not guilty?
So it's not. So we have tons of people who are sitting in jail because of our current systemic racist process. It isn't going to work like that. We switch to a restorative justice. Your community is not going to execute you on site. You would actually have to be proven guilty. There would actually have to be DNA. There would actually have to be, like, there is not going to be any reasonable doubt. This is really to deter mass shooters and serial killers.
But there have been cases
so if you don't want the death
penalty, right, but my thing is there's been cases before where people have been proven guilty only to find out that they were innocent 30 and 40 years later after they sat in jail.
So so I would again talk about, you're comparing it to the flawed system that we have. When people were sitting in jail, we ignored evidence. We didn't test evidence, right? People are exonerated because we finally got around to testing their DNA. I'm not saying eliminate anybody before we know that they're guilty. I'm not saying it happens tomorrow, but there does need to be a deterrent for the gun violence that we have in this country.
Okay. So here's the problem in reference to the DNA. DNA testing we were doing DNA testing in the 90s. And since the 90s, there have still been people that were wrongfully convicted. So that's why I'm asking, what about the people who are wrongfully convicted?
But they're wrongfully convicted under the current way that the justice system works. If you read the policy, it does not work anything like that anymore. Like, we're not using judges. We're not using federal courthouses. Like, it doesn't work like that anymore. You would actually have to read into it.
Right. But why does the community get to decide whether or not someone gets to live or die? What happened to restorative justice?
It is restorative justice, but it does leave the opportunity. I'm not saying that. I'm saying it's still on the table. But if we live in a society where you're not paying rent, you're not paying for your healthcare, you're not paying for, you have access to healthcare, like universal healthcare, you have access to mental health, and you still want to pull out weapons and harm people, you are a danger to society.
I do not agree with this policy. I'm just being 100%, because I can see this.
You are allowed to not. You are allowed to not agree with it. I don't think that I'm trying to force anyone to agree with it. I'm just telling you what the policy is. I talk to people who don't agree with the universal healthcare policy.
Yeah, but there's a difference between agreeing with universal healthcare and saying someone should die. Like, I think, there's a difference between that and an eye for an eye. I personally don't believe that we should decide whether or not, someone needs to be put to death.
And I respect your opinion on that.
Okay. So one other thing I want to get to, because there's a lot of them here, but I do want to get to the education policy. And then I also want to ask you about your stance on abortion as well. The education policy. How do you see, what is your vision for education in this country?
So a Montessori education that includes actual trade education and traditional, like, not sitting in a desk education, but like, so you could go to be a doctor or a scientist. Both of those things need to be available to all children. So it's an expanded policy, but it does include free college as well.
Right. So I don't know if every state has this, but in Massachusetts we do have Montessori schools, and they are highly respected. So it's great to give children that, to give them
so in
hope.
around the country, they're not everywhere, and it doesn't have access. And so what I'm saying is we would be converting the way children go into a classroom and they sit there for 8 hours a day. Federally would be paying for it. So all schools would be converted to Montessori schools to provide children with that education. All classrooms would be smaller than 18 students. All classrooms would have actually 2 teachers. And everyone who works in the education industry will be getting a raise.
Okay, the question that I have is abortion. So this is a hot topic. Obviously, the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. How do you feel that issue should be handled?
I believe in a person's right to choose. One of my executive orders on the first day will be to codify an individual's right to choose. Like actually make sure that's something that's not going to be able to be adjusted.
Okay, so and to make it so that the Supreme Court could not overturn that again in the future.
Correct. Correct.
Okay, yeah,
But we
because
also
that's
need
one
to
of the
expand
things.
the Supreme Court as well.
Why do you feel we should expand the Supreme Court?
Because I have legislation I need to push through and I can legally do it, and that's how I'm going to get it done.
Okay, so two more questions. One of the questions I have is, I know some of these policies you would like to do through executive order. For the policies that cost money, it would need to receive the approval of Congress. So how would you get some of these policies approved in
Correct.
Congress?
So we have to trigger new elections. So my first two executive orders is an age cap, 65, and then term limits. That's going to make sure that anybody who's been there too long, they're not there. So that way you can get Congress people that actually want to vote for these things.
Interesting, interesting. And then last but
But you
not least,
also need you also need a new constitution.
a new constitution.
We need to push for a new constitution that actually protects everyone.
And then in reference to funding for your campaign, is this going to be a grassroots campaign, or will you swear off, for example, will you swear off corporate donations?
Yes. So yeah, corporations aren't donating to me. What we've been doing is going around raising the money, selling fried chicken. My campaign bus, we've gone to 4 cities so far. The bus, we had an issue with the bus. We got into an accident. So the bus is in the shop. So that's why we're home this week. But we've been on the road for the last few weeks. We continue to go around the country. We're raising the money ourselves. It costs $300,000 to get on all the ballots. So far, we've successfully achieved ballot access in 7 states. The issue here is not all the candidate portals are open. But once we are, I'm earning the money to get on the ballot. I don't need to take crazy bribes. It only costs $300,000 to run for president, $200,000 to pay my staff. We can make that money ourselves.
Well, you have your math down. Jasmine, one more question. Have you talked to or have you connected with Dr. West in any way, shape, or form?
We contacted Dr. West as soon as he announced to schedule a debate and a sit down. No response. We contacted Afro Man as soon as we've contacted everybody. My campaign, because of how polling goes for debates, this was before the DNC has decided that they weren't going to do debates. We already knew that the GOP has pulled out of the debate process. So what we have done is contacted every candidate that is running to schedule a debate. Some have accepted and we've done that, and some have not.
That's interesting.
But
I have not heard from Afro Man either, if it makes you feel better.
We're gonna keep trying. We're gonna keep trying.
Afro Man hasn't responded to me either, Jasmine. So you can join the club. Oh man. Well, Jasmine, thank you so much.
What I will tell anybody that is listening, though, because I know you said.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say, I see a lot of people in your comment section. I see a lot of people in your comment section that said that they have questions. I have the availability on my website that people can schedule meetings to talk to me directly. You can yell at me. You can say whatever you got to say. I'm willing to listen to you. You get 30 minutes. This is how we fix what's going on in America. It is listening to other Americans. So if people have questions, I saw somebody said, what do you mean we don't have fruit producing trees? They're hurting my head. We do not have fruit producing trees on the street. You'd have to go to a grocery store to acquire your fruit. So in other countries, people can just walk up to a fruit tree and grab the fruit and eat it and keep going. That's why starvation in other countries is very different than starving here in America. So for people who do have questions, please contact me. We will schedule a meeting. I will talk to you and anything you want to say to me. I even saw somebody that wanted to know about MMT, so they can schedule a meeting to talk to me about that if they are interested.
All right, Jasmine, thank you so much. Guys, go to Jasmine's website if you want to ask her questions. She's here to talk to you. So definitely check out her site. And Jasmine, good luck.
Thank you so much.
All right, guys. let's go ahead and get into it. I want to shout out patrons. We'll go through a couple of comments and then we'll get into tonight's stories. So let's go ahead and give a shout out to everyone who is a Sabby patron. Thank you guys so much for your support. Really do appreciate it. If you're interested in being a Sabby patron, I have 5 categories: Ultimate, Sabinators, Sabsters. It used to be bigger than this. I don't know what I did. Oh, well. Sabsters, Sabbies, and of course, members. All of their names are listed here. You can also see their names scrolling across the bottom of the screen there on the ticker. And I want to give a special shout out to new Sabby patrons. Let's give it up for, and I hope I don't mess this up. Let's give it up for Zawawe, Jawe. Oh man, Jawawi. Oh, I'm so sorry. Ikun Ogun and Matt N. Thank you guys so much. Really do appreciate your help there. Okay. Let's go to these comments and then we'll get into the other stories. Shout out to Duck Under for becoming a Sabby member. That's the Dave Chappelle print skit. I love it. I love it. Shirts, blouses. Thank you for the super chat, Mikey. Sabby, you do great work. Great guest. Thank you. Shout out to my comrade JB, says, hello, everyone. Forehead kisses. Thank you for the super chat, Roger. Sab, tell her to familiarize herself with the National Infrastructure Bank HR 4052. That take care of and pay for her entire infrastructure plan. You can tell her that on her website yourself. Thank you for the super chat, Marcos. Please look into the Innocence Project. Yes, I'm very familiar with that. That's what I was concerned about, is that there have been a number of cases and situations where people were proven guilty, but they were found innocent later on. So what else are we going to discuss tonight? Let's go ahead and show that thumbnail and get into the rest of the stories. Tonight, we are discussing Marianne staff troubles here. Oh, dear. Former staff member of Marianne Williamson has released some information. We're going to get into that. I don't know what to believe, but we're going to get into it. We're also going to discuss Donald Trump shames Ron DeSantis. This is huge news for those of you, especially if you live in Florida. We're also going to discuss FBI director grilled. That happened yesterday. I hope you've been paying attention to these testimonies in Congress. And of course, Jasmine Sherman was just here running for president as an independent candidate for 2024. Okay, let's go ahead and get into this first story. The FBI director has finally testified in front of Congress yesterday. Although Chris Christie believes that it went very well for him, I actually do not think that it went very well for him. There are 3 issues I want to discuss. The first issue is the FBI director's connection with FISA. So for those who are not aware, FISA is the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. So we want to go ahead and get started with that first, with this clip here from Matt Gaetz. So Matt Gaetz really went in on the FBI director yesterday, a couple of others as well. We'll get into those also.
How many illegal FISA queries have occurred under your leadership of the FBI?
Well, there are reports that have come out with different numbers about compliance incidents.
More than 1 million illegal ones? Because that's what the Inspector General said. The Inspector General said that in the 3.4 million of these queries, more than 1 million were in error. Do you have any basis to disagree with that assessment by the Inspector General?
I'm not sure actually that's a correct characterization of the Inspector General's findings on that.
The internet will remind you of that in moments. But let's now go to what the court said. The court said it was over 200,000 that have occurred on your watch. Do you have any basis to disagree with that assessment?
Again, I don't have the numbers as I sit here right now. What I can
Seems like a number you should know. How many times the FBI is breaking the law under your watch? How many illegal FISA queries have occurred under your leadership of the FBI?
Well, there are reports that have come out with different numbers about compliance incidents.
More than 1 million?
So here's mistake number 1. You're the FBI director. You know you're going to testify in front of Congress, and he did not come prepared. first and foremost, you should know numbers. You should have known that this question was going to come your way. It's not like you're walking into this blind and you don't know anything. So he should have known the numbers. And number two, to me, it's really interesting because when we talk about FISA, again, that's the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Agency. This kind of reminds me of the Twitter files a little bit too, because remember, one of the things that was revealed during the Twitter files is the FBI's engagement with Twitter executives and censoring people and certain accounts that they said were foreign accounts. We're going to get into that in a little bit as well. I don't buy that Director Wray here doesn't know these things. I think he showed up very ill prepared, and I think he felt like he could do that because he is the FBI director, and I feel like he knows that he's protected. I mean, you can't walk in like this. Listen.
Illegal ones? Because that's what the Inspector General said. The Inspector General said that in the 3.4 million of these queries, more than 1 million were in error. Do you have any basis to disagree with that assessment?
More than 1 million of those queries were an error, and that's coming from the Inspector General. That's dangerous. How do you make that many errors? More than 1 million? And that leads to this question. What else have you messed up? What other errors has the FBI director made? Let's finish here.
By the Inspector General.
I'm not sure actually that's a correct characterization of the Inspector General's findings on that.
The internet will remind you of that in moments. But let's now go to.
So when Matt Gaetz says the internet will remind you of that moment, that's Matt Gaetz letting him know that all you had to do was Google the information, that the information is available on the internet. So anybody can look this up. So if Matt Gaetz was able to do it, the FBI director is able to do it as well. So that's a way of him kind of giving a dig at him in a sense to kind of let him know, like, this is not difficult information for you to find.
What the court said it was over 200,000 that have occurred on your watch. Do you have any basis to disagree with that assessment?
Again, I don't have the number as I sit here right now. What I can
Seems like a number you should know. How many times the FBI is breaking the law under your watch?
Over 200,000, the court has said. That's a lot. That's a lot. So I just want you to think about the way that they spoke to Matt Taibbi when he was there, not Matt Gaetz, but some of the representatives, the way that they spoke to him. How dare you not know this? How dare you not know that? Matt Taibbi is a journalist. This is the director of the FBI, and he doesn't know these numbers in reference to query errors that he made in reference to FISA. Now there's more, because this gets pretty in the nitty gritty. So Jonathan shared this. Representative Mike Johnson grills FBI Director Christopher Wray on the injunction ruling regarding the landmark Missouri versus Biden case. Let's go ahead and get into this discussion here.
And then July 4th, we had this explosive 155-page opinion from a federal court in my home state of Louisiana. It explains in detail that the FBI has been directly involved in what the court says is, quote, arguably the most massive attack against free speech in United States history. The court ordered the White House, DOJ, and FBI, among others, to immediately cease colluding with and coercing social media companies to suppress American speech, of course, conservative speech in particular. Director Wray, I find it stunning. You made no mention of this court opinion either in your opening statement today or in this lengthy 14-page report that you prepared on July 12th, which was 8 days after the court ruling. Have you read the ruling, sir?
I am familiar with the ruling, and I've reviewed it with our Office of General Counsel.
So that's a yes. He could have just said yes.
Are you deeply disturbed by what they've told you about the ruling if you haven't read it yourself?
Obviously, we're going to comply with the court's order, the court's preliminary injunction. We sent out guidance to the field and the headquarters about how to do that. Needless to say, the injunction itself is a subject of ongoing litigation, and so I'll decline to comment further on.
Well, let me tell you what
they shouldn't have had their hands on these social media platforms to begin with in the first place. Like, it's really embarrassing in a sense. Like, if I was the FBI director, I'd be really embarrassed to sit there and have to admit, well, the court made this ruling against you in reference to your activity on these social media platforms. It's embarrassing. And you know why it's embarrassing? Because a lot of times I think the average American sits at home and they watch these TV shows and these movies where someone is an FBI agent or they work for the CIA and the NSA, and they make it seem like they're doing like this stressful job of trying to track down serial killers. Not to say they don't do that, but if you watch the movies, it makes it seem like this is what FBI agents are doing. They're out there looking for serial killers. They're trying to stop like terrorist threats on the American population. Like that's what the entertainment business would have you to lead. And then for you to have to sit there in front of Congress and for the whole world to basically hear, this is what they've been doing. They've been spending time on social media platforms. And to that, I say again, don't you have a serial killer to go catch? This is what they've been spending their time doing. It reminds me of the times when cops go to Dunkin' Donuts just to get donuts and just sit in the car instead of actually trying to stop crime.
Court concluded, because it should be the first thing you think about every morning and the last thing you think about at night. They said that, quote, the court found, apparently the FBI engaged in a massive effort to suppress disfavored conservative speech and blatantly ignored the First Amendment's right to free speech. The evidence shows the FBI threatened adverse consequences to social media companies that they did not comply with its censorship request.
They were threatening social media companies. The FBI they were threatening them.
The court found that, quote, this seemingly unrelenting pressure by the FBI and the other defendants had the intended result of suppressing millions of protected free speech postings by American citizens. As a result, the court states, for example, millions of citizens did not hear about the Hunter Biden laptop story prior to the November 3rd, 2020 election.
Okay, so now it gets into the Hunter Biden laptop story. So when we talk about the suppression and we talk about the suppression of freedom of speech, it only applied to certain areas because it was okay for them not to suppress certain subjects that they found was favorable of the Biden administration, for example. They wanted to suppress the Hunter Biden laptop story because that's not favorable to the Biden administration. That's not favorable to the president of the United States. But then there were some issues that they let get a pass. So that being said, they weren't even consistent when it comes to the suppression.
Page 4 of the court ruling lists some of the important subjects that the Biden administration and the FBI forced the social media platforms to suppress. The evidence shows your agency, the people that directly report to you, suppressed conservative-leaning free speech about topics like the laptop, the lab leak theory of COVID-19's origin, the effectiveness of masks and COVID-19 lockdowns and vaccines, speech about election integrity in the 2020 presidential election, security of voting by mail, even parody about the president himself, negative posts about the economy. The FBI made the social media platforms pull that information off the internet if it came from conservative sources.
Now, why would they want to suppress negative content about the economy? Why would they want to suppress that? Because they don't want a class war. That's why they want to suppress it. The same reason why they suppressed and then eventually stopped the Black Panther movement. Because they didn't want a class war. Remember, the Black Panther Party wasn't just about Black liberation. The Black Panther Party was out there feeding people in the community, clothing people in the community. And when you have someone like Fred Hampton join forces with the Young Lords and the Young Patriots, now you have people of different races uniting together for a class struggle. So just like they suppressed and eventually stopped the Black Panther Party movement, is the same way that they have suppressed and is still trying to stop any type of class consciousness in this country. Otherwise, that doesn't make any sense to me. Why would you suppress that? People complaining about the economy. All people have to do is look at their bank account, look at the prices in the grocery store, look at the gas prices. It's not like people can't see this for themselves. But what they didn't want is they didn't want content on social media drawing more attention to it because it can ignite a fuse in people. There have been multiple labor strikes that have been happening that are still happening. JB and I just talked about the actors going on strike now, along with the writers. So when you have all these different labor strikes back to back to back, and you have inflation, and people aren't paid a living wage, and the homelessness rate has increased in this country, that actually wakes the American people up more so to a class consciousness, which can lead to more anger and then to action and then eventually a class war. And that is what they do not want to happen.
They did this under the guise that it was disinformation. Can you define what disinformation is?
What I can tell you is that our focus is not on disinformation, broadly speaking.
Well, wait a
but on
minute. Yes, it is.
malign-
Wait a minute.
Can I answer the question?
You can in a minute. Your star witness said in the litigation, Elvis Chan, who's in charge of this, said they do it on the basis of disinformation. We need a definition of what that is.
Simple question. What is the definition of disinformation?
Our focus is on malign foreign disinformation, that is foreign hostile actors who engage in covert efforts to
Mr.
abuse.
Ray.
That is a damn lie. Okay? Think about the examples that he just gave. Negative information about the economy. Okay? The Hunter Biden laptop story. What did that have to do with foreign information? Those documents were leaked right here in the United States. It was the New York Post who leaked the Hunter Biden laptop story. Remember, Glenn Greenwald wanted to cover that first, and The Intercept said no. That's why Glenn Greenwald left The Intercept. So the New York Post released the story first. Okay, so what is he talking about? Foreign actors? These are things that happen right here in this country, not abroad. Let's go back a little bit. What a mess.
Not on disinformation, broadly speaking.
Well, wait a
but on
minute. Yes, it
malign-
is.
Well,
Wait a minute.
Can I answer the question?
You can in a minute. Your star witness said in the litigation, Elvis Chan, who's in charge of this, said they do it on the basis of disinformation. We need a definition of what that is.
Our focus is on malign foreign disinformation, that is foreign hostile actors who engage in covert efforts to
Mr. Ray,
abuse our social media platforms, which is something that is not seriously in dispute.
I have
as
to
a
stop you for
phenomenon.
time.
We're going to pause here for a second because the Twitter files actually proves him wrong. Because one of the things that was revealed in the Twitter files is that some of those accounts that they told Twitter executives to suppress or to remove that they thought were foreign agents weren't even foreign accounts. They were people right here in the US who were American. So you see how he's trying to spin this to make it seem like we were just trying to protect the American people from these bad foreign actors. You guys were censoring people that you said were affiliated with Russia that were not affiliated with Russia at all. This is the lie that he's telling. Look at the look on his face. You guys believe this guy? Come on, man.
That's not accurate. You need to read this court opinion because you're in charge of enforcing it. The court has found that, and Elvis Chan testified under oath in charge of this for you. He said 50%. He had a 50% success rate in having alleged election disinformation taken down or censored. That wasn't just foreign adversaries, sir. That was American citizens. How do you answer for that?
Well,
see, that's another example. That happened right here. That's why I said this does not make any sense.
first off, I'm not sure that's a correct characterization.
Comes
of
right
his
out of the opinion.
testimony.
You should read
But
it.
of his testimony. But what I would say is the FBI is not in the business of moderating content or causing any social media company to suppress or censor.
That is not what the court has found.
What I would
That is a lie. That is a big fat lie. Do you guys see why they attacked Matt Taibbi so heavily? Do you see why they came after him the way that he did? Because he exposed information that really we weren't really supposed to know. We weren't supposed to know that the FBI was monitoring these sites. I mean, I always had suspicion, but after the Twitter files, we had actual evidence. We had actual evidence, okay? So my whole thing is that we know that's a lie. Representative Johnson knows it's a lie because he was on the committee for the Twitter files. So when Matt Taibbi testified in front of Congress, Representative Johnson was on that committee. So he heard the whole thing. So the thing is again, after that, even the court realized that, yes, they were on those social media platforms. And I cannot believe that this guy is sitting here telling this bold-faced lie that they did not have their hands on these platforms. There are emails from the FBI, screenshots of them revealed in the Twitter files. Well, not only did they have their hands on those platforms, but they reached out to certain Twitter executives. One of them, Yoel Roth, you heard his name over and over again, asking him to suppress certain content and to remove certain accounts. This is all in email. So I'm sorry, like, he's sitting here lying, but the emails don't lie.
I'd also say is among the things that you listed off, I find ironic the reference to the lab leak theory. The idea that the FBI would somehow be involved in suppressing references to the lab leak theory is somewhat absurd when you consider the fact that the FBI was the only agency in the entire intelligence community to reach the assessment that it was more likely than not that that was the explanation
But
for the pandemic.
your agents pulled it off the internet, sir. That's what the evidence in the court has found.
Time of the gentleman has expired. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Oh, man. And Chris Christie thought that this guy did a good job. Now, I have another clip that I want to play as well, because this is a hot mess. The Hunter Biden issue comes up. Of course, it's Matt Gaetz who brings it up. And Matt Gaetz wants to know, is the FBI trying to protect Joe Biden? Listen to this, guys.
The American people need to understand what just happened. My Democrat colleague just asked the director of the FBI whether or not they are buying information about our fellow Americans. And the answer is, well, we'll just have to get back to you on that. It sounds really complicated. But I have other questions. I'm sitting here with my father. I will make certain that between the man sitting next to me and every person he knows and my ability to forever hold a grudge, that you will regret not following my direction. I am sitting here waiting for the call with my father. Sounds like a shakedown, doesn't it, Director?
I'm not going to get into commenting on that.
You seem deeply uncurious about it, don't you? Almost suspiciously uncurious. Are you protecting the Bidens?
Absolutely not. The FBI
Well, you
does
won't
not
answer
and
the
has
question.
no
Hold on.
interest in
You won't answer the
protecting
question
anyone
about whether or not
politically.
that's a shakedown, and everybody knows why you won't answer it. Because to the millions of people who will see this, they know it is. And your inability to acknowledge that is deeply revealing about you. But let's go from the...
If they're not protecting the Bidens, then why did they ask Twitter to censor and suppress the Hunter Biden laptop story? If they're not trying to protect the Bidens, what were they trying to prevent the American people from seeing there?
uncurious to the downright nosy. How many illegal FISA queries have occurred under your leadership of the FBI?
Well, there are reports that have come out with different numbers about compliance incidents.
More than 1 million illegal ones? Because that's what the Inspector General said. The Inspector General said that...
We're going to speed up a little bit here because we saw this part where he talks about the Inspector General. Okay.
Again, I don't have the numbers as I sit here right now. What I can
Seems
tell
like
you,
a number you should know. How many times the FBI is breaking the law under your watch, especially if it's like over 1 million, to not know that number? And I'm worried about your veracity on the subject as well. Play the video.
letters for
You going to the
investigation
FISA
of
court?
the Capitol.
Or you
I don't
going-
believe FISA is remotely implicated in our investigation.
So there, Senator Lee's asking you whether or not FISA was in any way involved in your January 6th investigation, and you say no. Was that truthful?
I said that I did not believe it was.
Okay, so now let's pull up what the court said, which was something a little different than what you said. So here, nope, that's not the right one. Yeah, here we go. Right there, it says, the government has reported additional significant violations of the querying standard, including several relating to the January 6, 2021 breach of the Capitol. So I guess the question, Director Ray, is did you not know when you were answering these questions that the FBI was engaging in these illegal searches, or did you perjure yourself to Senator Lee?
I certainly didn't perjure myself. At the time that I testified in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee, I didn't have that piece of information. I will add...
Well, that was a court order. You didn't have that piece of information because the court hadn't yet rendered a judgment. Did you not know when you gave the untruthful answer before Senator Lee that this was going on?
It was a truthful answer. I did not believe FISA had been involved in the January 6th
But it was.
investigation.
So you didn't, the answer is the FBI has broken so bad that people can go and engage in queries that when you come before the Congress to answer questions, you're like blissfully ignorant. You're blissfully ignorant as to the unlawful queries. You're blissfully ignorant as to the Biden shakedown regime.
I don't think he's ignorant at all. I think he's just covering his ass. Like, I don't think he's that ignorant. You're the director. How do you not know that these things are happening? And this just really just shows you just how broken and dysfunctional these government agencies are in our country. No order, no organization. They seem all over the place. We're supposed to trust them to protect us from terrorists. This organization, he doesn't even know what's going on, according to him.
And it just seems like it gets into a kind of a creepy place as well. Go to our next image on what the court said. Like, just so the American people realize, the court has smacked you down, ruling FBI personnel apparently conducted queries for improper personal reasons. People were looking themselves up, they were looking their ex-lovers up. Who has been held accountable or fired as a consequence of the FBI using the FISA process as their like creepy personal snoop machine?
Isn't that like an abuse of company like power and funds? The FBI agents have time to sit there and look up themselves to use queries for personal interest. I don't think that's right. Again, like I said before, shouldn't they be out trying to find serial killers? This is what they've been doing with their time, people. This is what they've been doing with their time. And contacting people on Twitter telling them to remove people.
There have been instances in which individuals have had disciplinary action and who
Name
are no
them.
longer with it. I can't get into it here, but we can follow back up
But
with
don't you
that.
see that that's kind of the thing, Director Ray, that you preside over the FBI that has the lowest level of trust in the FBI's history. People trusted the FBI more when J. Edgar Hoover was running the place than when you are. And the reason is because you don't give straight answers. You give answers that later a court deems aren't true. And then at the end of the day, you won't criticize an obvious shakedown when it's directly in front of us. And it appears as though you're whitewashing the conduct of corrupt people.
Respectfully, Congressman, in your home state of Florida, the number of people applying to come work for us and devote their lives working for us is up over 100%.
We're deeply proud of them.
Probably not now. Probably not now after seeing that. Now, what was really interesting to me is that Chris Christie, of course, tried to make this seem like it was something that it wasn't. He believes that the FBI director actually did a really good job. Of course, I 100% disagree with that sentiment. But again, Chris always looking out for Chris. I'm going to go ahead and play his statement here after that hearing. So I said, bootlicker Chris Christie thinks the FBI director Chris Wray did a good job. I'm sure his statement has nothing to do with his presidential campaign. So you got to remember, Chris Christie, to me, he's always been a bootlicker. You know, he kisses up to whoever's in power at that time so that he can move on politically in his career. When Donald Trump was in office, he was praising Donald Trump. Once Donald Trump was out of office, he's like, yeah, I don't think we should go down that road again, yada, yada. You know, he just kind of moves with the wind. He doesn't really care. He's just trying to maintain some type of power and have some legitimacy in reference to the world of politics. So here he is in reference to his response about the FBI director's performance.
Jim Comey and Eric Holder and Loretta Lynch drastically harmed the Department of Justice and the FBI. And Chris Wray has now spent years fixing that.
Hold on one second. Eric, can you increase the volume on this one? The volume on this one is really, really low. We'll bring up the volume on it, guys, because you need to hear this. Like, I just can't, like, this guy really bothers me. He irks my nerve.
Jim Comey and Eric Holder and Loretta Lynch drastically harmed the Department of Justice and the FBI. And Chris Wray has now spent years fixing that. Now, are there going to be disagreements? Of course, there are always going to be disagreements between Congress and the executive branch. And they would like more information, and he's got obligations under grand jury rules to not give everything they want to give. But I will tell you something, what you saw today, I think, was an animated and combative FBI director who's defending the men and women who work for him every day and do a great job and protect
He was defending himself. He was defending and protecting himself. Here's Chris Christie, the professional bootlicker ass kisser. Let me be nice to the FBI director because I'm running for president.
The men and women who work for him every day and do a great job and protect us from domestic terrorism, from international terrorism, and from these drug cartels, and are helping state and local law enforcement every day with their things. So, yeah.
How are they helping us against the drug cartels? The drug cartels that still exist? Think about it, guys. If the FBI wanted to demolish the drug cartels, they could have done so a long time ago. If they demolish the drug cartels, then you don't have the transfer of drugs to the United States. Then you don't have people using that drug. And then the police don't have people to arrest for using that drug. A lot of arrests that we have in this country are drug related. A lot of them are related to like marijuana, which is ridiculous. That should be legal in this country. It's a plant. Let's be real. But think about it. There's a reason why things, you mean to tell me after all these years, all these decades, you mean to tell me the FBI can't take down the drug cartel if they really wanted to? There's business to be made there. There's police officers that are paid off to look the other way. Let's not get it twisted. They like that there's a drug cartel because that gives them excuse to lock up people like you. Miss me with that, Chris. He's giving you the picture of the FBI that you see in the entertainment business.
And from these drug cartels, and are helping state and local law enforcement every day with their things. So, yeah, I think Chris Wray has done a very good job. And I think, look, a lot of the stuff you see today, John, is theater, and people trying to raise money for campaigns. Doesn't mean there aren't problems.
Like him. Let's talk about raising money for campaigns. Here you are on Fox News. You know, I always see this man's face. It don't matter if he's running for president or not. I always see Chris Christie pop up somewhere trying to remain relevant. Come look at my new book. Come check out my new speech. Let's all get together and try to promote this person. Oh, and by the way, I'm running for president again. He's talking about himself.
Problems at the FBI? There are. But I believe Chris is a guy who can get them fixed, and he's fixed a lot of them already. Jim Comey and Eric.
What a mess. What a mess. What a bootlicker. Boy, I tell you. What a doozy. FBI director, I do not think did a good job. That's just on me. There's more footage that you can watch. Some of it I can't play on here because of what is said, but there's a lot more that you can watch as well. If you have not had a chance to do so, go ahead and smash that like button. That helps me with the algorithm. Thank you very much. And I'll take the comments on Rockfin, Eric. Call-in should be really interesting tonight. Oh my God. Thank you for the comments on Rockfin, Dominique. Jasmine has a more detailed platform than any other candidate so far. I will contact her to see if she will follow the pledge on my website, constituentpolling.org. Thank you, Dominique. And thank you, Roger Meadows. Reparations. Presidents can direct their Treasury Secretary to mint a platinum coin, chartering any value, and appropriate it towards anything you wish. Tax not needed. We'll never agree with the candidate's entire platform. One of the flaws the representative democracy, I think you mean with the representative democracy. We are expected to embrace their entire platform, which is why we need national CBI amendment so we can ratify our own laws to U.S. Constitution. Awesome. Thank you so much for that. Okie doke. Let me go to these comments here and we'll go to the next story. Thank you for the super chat, GDNPB. Thanks, Sabby. Of all the times Congress has grilled any government head for abuse of power by them, I don't know one that resulted in any charges. Government always finds no crimes by the government. That's a good question. Is there going to be any accountability after this hearing? I mean, after the Twitter Files hearing, Stacey Plaskett was calling for Matt Taibbi to go to jail. So is there going to be any accountability in reference to the FBI director? And thank you for the super chat, Michael. You are 1,000 times more real than Karen Hunter and Boulay. Oh, thank you for that. All right. NG said, spoiler alert, no, there won't be. So you see, it's just, yeah. So the next story is pretty interesting. Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis obviously have been bickering with each other back and forth over the past couple of months. I don't remember who took the first shot, but shots were fired, okay? And they have been tug of war with each other a little bit. Well, recently, I think this may alarm some of you, especially those of you who live in Florida, because even though Ron DeSantis won re-election for governor, it appears that Florida residents are willing to get behind Donald Trump instead of getting behind Ron DeSantis. You heard that right. Now, this came from The Hill. Florida poll finds Trump well ahead of DeSantis in his state. Let's go on here. A poll found, I'm going to make this bigger because there we go. A poll, why is this? I hate The Hill's like video thing. Let me go back out. Go away. A poll found that Florida Republicans strongly favor former President Trump over their Governor Ron DeSantis in a hypothetical 2024 presidential primary contest. The new Florida Atlantic University Main Street Pollcom Lab poll showed that Trump held a 20-point lead over DeSantis among registered GOP voters when asked whom they would support in 2024 primary if it was held today. Half said Trump, while 30% said DeSantis and 7% said they were undecided. Donald Trump has a 20-point lead ahead of DeSantis in Florida. What does that tell you guys? This is embarrassing. Like if you're Ron DeSantis, you got to be feeling a little kind of way. Like it's your state. And your own GOP voters are choosing Donald Trump over you. Now, I'm going to get into the reason why I think that is. And this is something that I warned people about earlier on when he announced his campaign. I think Ron DeSantis is heading in the wrong direction. Other candidates who trailed behind them include entrepreneur Vivek at 4%, Tim Scott at 3%, former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, Mike Pence, and Asha Hutchinson, each at 2%, South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley at 1%. The poll was conducted June 27th to July 1st before DeSantis faced blowback for a controversial video attacking Trump for his LGBTQ record. The poll highlights Donald Trump's quite durable support. He does especially well with the white working class voters who have consistently formed a steadfast base for the former president. Now, that's coming from an FAU political science professor, Kevin Wagner. This persistent support continues to bolster Trump's strong and steady position within the party. Still, the gap between the two candidates is narrowing. In April, a similar poll showed Trump held a 24-point lead over DeSantis, with 57% supporting Trump, 33% supporting DeSantis, 5% undecided, and approximately 6% supporting other candidates. Among all voters surveyed in Florida, not just Republicans, respondents supported DeSantis more than Trump. 54% approve of DeSantis, 41% strongly, 13% somewhat, and 43% disapprove. 34% strongly, 9% somewhat. Trump's favorability is at 50%, 33% strongly, 17% somewhat, and his unfavorability is at 47%, 38% strongly, 9% somewhat. So that's when they poll all voters, so across political parties. But when it comes to the Republican Party in particular, Ron DeSantis is not beating Donald Trump in his state, and people need to ask why. That is very telling. The poll also showed DeSantis would beat President Biden in a head-to-head matchup by 13 points if it were held today. 49% would support DeSantis, 36% would support Biden, 11% would support other, and 4% undecided. In a matchup between Trump and Biden, on the other hand, Trump would lead by a narrower margin of 10 points. So 10 points versus 11 points. Either way, what people need to take away from this is that if the GOP nominee is Donald Trump or Ron DeSantis, both of them right now beat Joe Biden if the election was held today. And I'm pretty sure a lot of that has to do with the economy. These polls could be an important motivator for DeSantis to promote his bid for the Republican primary, as he may be a stronger candidate against the incumbent. That's not what the other polls show, just FYI, based on what I've seen. The poll indicates that the margin held by Trump or DeSantis at this time is larger than the 3.3% poll vote difference observed in the 2020 presidential election, suggesting that Florida is shifting towards becoming a safe state for Republicans. Let's knock out the safe part and let me just keep it real. Florida is a red state. Florida is not a swing state. This is not 2008 anymore. This is 2023, and Florida is a red state. There are blue pockets in Florida, blue counties, but overall, Florida is now a red state. Now, I want to get into this video clip here. DeSantis flop due to weird, alienating, hard right campaign. But before I get into this video, I want to say this. When I saw Ron DeSantis' campaign announcement, and I played it on this show, and I think we were all kind of laughing in the background. I was laughing on camera. I pointed out he was focusing on the wrong issues. Him like running on, let's go against the woke crowd and let's be anti-woke is not the most pressing need of working class people in this country right now. The most pressing need of working class Americans right now is the economy and a living wage and things like healthcare. He's not addressing those issues. When I played pieces of the Twitter space that he held with Elon Musk, similar situation. There was too much focus on woke, and not focus on foreign policy at all. That wasn't even brought up in the discussion. There wasn't this focus on the economy. And these are the issues that people care about, especially if you have to live paycheck to paycheck, especially if you're one of those workers that's on strike right now because your company doesn't want to give you the raise or a living wage that you deserve. That is the number one issue when you look at the polls and what voters have said. But he decided, let's go out here and run on anti-woke this and anti-woke that. And I'm going to keep it real with you. Most people in the hood are not thinking about that. Most people living in low income and poor communities are not thinking about that at all. They're thinking about, I hope I'm able to pay this electric bill next month. We're going to have to cut back a little bit on the groceries this month because last month we went over because the prices are higher. We may have to start carpooling, drop off the kids at school, and then go to work. We all have to jump in one car and do it all together because we can't afford the gas right now. Those are the things that working class people are thinking about, not woke. Now let's get into this clip here, because one of the things that's mentioned here on MSNBC, desperate and thirsty, DeSantis flop due to weird, alienating campaign. Listen to this.
Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. Hope you had a good July 4th weekend. We are rapidly approaching the real, actual, serious for now start of the 24 Republican primary. The first RNC debate is next month in Milwaukee, where the Republicans will also hold their 2024 convention. And while it's still too early for any real predictions about who voters will choose or how this is all going to play out, right now, speaking as of today, it does look like Donald Trump is way ahead of everyone else. And that's in large part because Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, who was initially hyped up as the candidate who could take on Trump, has seen his poll numbers tank. Just look at the polling averages since the start of this calendar year. DeSantis' line should come with its own slide whistle.
We're going to pause right here because I want to show you where the difference happens. So this was pre-February 2023, right? So he was up near the 40% mark there. He was actually closer to I almost said Dr. Trump. He was actually closer to Donald Trump then, but that was before he launched his campaign. Okay. And then we go around the February, there's the Trump indictments. Notice how Trump's approval goes up with the indictments. There's a little bit of a dip here, goes up again. Every time the legal issues continues to go up with the legal issues. I told you that would happen. People would see him more as a martyr. And then you'll see like Ron DeSantis, he has this announcement and notice how it goes. It goes down because again, like Donald Trump has the indictments, but Donald Trump was addressing the war issue. He was addressing the Ukraine war. He was addressing inflation. He said the economy was a mess. He said it was a disaster. Again, I told you, I don't care for Donald Trump as a politician. I would never vote for Donald Trump, but Donald Trump knows how to speak to a room because he knows how to read the room. So he knew what the pressing needs were for the American people. Ron DeSantis, you would think with him being governor, he would have known that as well. But Ron can't get out of his Ivy League brain to actually understand what working class people really want and need in this country. So he goes, let's just run on wokeity woke. Not working out too well.
30 points behind Trump in an average of the national polls. Even a top official at a pro-DeSantis super PAC recently conceded the Florida governor's campaign has been a bust so far.
Right now in national polling, we are way behind. I'll be the first to admit that, okay? I believe in being really blunt and really honest. It's an uphill battle. I don't think it's an unwinnable battle by any stretch, okay? But clearly, Donald Trump is the runaway front runner. In the first 4 states, which matter tremendously, polls are a lot tighter. We're clearly still down. We're down double digits. We have work to do. We have wood to chop.
Now, it does seem like a bad sign when one of your top surrogates has to admit that your opponent is the runaway front runner, although, credit where due, it's true at least. And there are a lot of reasons the DeSantis campaign is doing so poorly. One reason is what some are calling a lack of charisma, which seems to be alienating voters on the campaign trail, especially in those early states where you do a lot of retail politicking. You could judge for yourself. Here he is in action during a campaign stop at the southern border.
There were people I was reading from Tajikistan coming to the southern border. I remember seeing Libya. I think they've identified about 10,000 Chinese nationals coming across the southern border.
This guy Ron DeSantis is not personable. He doesn't give people the impression he has no charisma, right, gamer? He doesn't give people the impression that he actually likes talking to people and he wants to hear what they have to say. I mean, even if he doesn't, as a candidate, you should at least know how to fake it. He doesn't even know how to do that. You can tell he looks awkward. He looks uncomfortable, looks out of his element, probably standing there thinking, I'd rather be at like a Four Seasons somewhere, eating a nice big steak and away from all these people. He does not look comfortable among the masses. And he just doesn't come across as personal or relatable. The dude struggles. And I'm going to keep it real with you. Some things you can change, right? There's some coaching that people can do that can help candidates and make them a little bit more likable. But then there are just some things that just you can't really change. Like, I'm sorry, but charisma is something that you either have or you just don't have. He's not charismatic. He doesn't have the flow, right? So like Bill Clinton was charismatic, Obama was charismatic, Trump can be charismatic in certain times. He doesn't have that. And from my experience with working with students, it is a lot easier to get someone who is more vocal and loud. It's easier to get them to pull it back a little bit and be a little bit more subdued than it is to take someone who is more introverted and to get them to pull it out of them and to get them to be, more extroverted and sociable and charismatic. It's harder to do that. So, dude's not likable.
I don't know. I mean, there's no accounting for taste, but does that do that for you? I don't know. The candidate quality issues are only partially to blame for DeSantis' decline, however. A big part of the reason I would submit that he has failed to gain any traction is he has chosen, whether he realizes it or not, to run this weird, alienating, hard right campaign. Like a Ron DeSantis doesn't care who he offends kind of thing. And again, I understand the logic here because it really is the case that there's an appetite for that kind of thing in the Republican base. And he thinks, I think, if I can game it out, he can gain some traction in the darkest, most anti-social corners of the internet where cruelty is a virtue. But I think even those folks and the people he's trying to appeal to will find his campaign's latest video to be as desperate and thirsty as the rest of us do.
I will do everything in my power to protect our LGBTQ citizens.
If Caitlyn Jenner were to walk into Trump Tower and want to use the bathroom, you would be fine with her.
So this is the video that the DeSantis team decided to run to basically point out hypocrisy with Donald Trump, that at one point in time, Donald Trump supported the LGBTQ movement and community, right? But this didn't work the way that they thought it would work. This actually backfired on the DeSantis campaign. Like, I don't know who came up with that idea. I don't know who came up with this. Oh my God.
Using any bathroom she chooses.
That is correct.
In the future, can transgender women compete in Miss Universe?
Yes.
Make America great again.
Psych!
I cannot think of anything more horrifying.
It really has shut down drag.
Just produced some of the harshest, most draconian laws that literally threaten trans existence.
Congratulations, Ron DeSantis. Mission accomplished. You win.
Who picked the music? Eric says good beat anyway. Why did they show the picture of the bodybuilder as if that's what Ron DeSantis looks like? That guy's built like Arnold Schwarzenegger. They know Ron DeSantis don't look like that.
Okay, there's a lot to say here. First, let me just say, I understand I, and probably you, are not the target audience for that video, which, again, fine. But everything about it is just so strange and so entirely alienating. I mean, yes, it's bait for folks like me, right? Oh, the liberals, including me in that video, they don't like Donald DeSantis, therefore you should like him. But again, that's lost underneath the crushing weight of the sheer effort of the uber online Twitter nerds who came up with this, who cannot or will not understand how to act and interact with other people like a normal person. In fact, I would go so far as to say that most people are not even the target audience for this video. I mean, even most Republicans are not the target audience for this video. When you're trying to compare yourself favorably to the serial killer from American Psycho. Yeah, that was definitely a stretch. I will say that I don't think that, well, maybe they realize it now. I don't think that Ron DeSantis' campaign realized at the time that his views are not as popular as he thought they would be on a national level. Nationally, they're not as popular. What tends to work okay in Florida doesn't necessarily work across the rest of the country. You may have lost the thread a bit when you've hired campaign staffers, one of whom tweeted the video, who have lauded praise on Holocaust denier Nick Fuentes, right? Who like to hang out in the parts of the internet where people impress each other with how much of an edgelord they are and how they're never going to get married or have any kind of romantic relationship. Well, maybe this is the kind of campaign you end up running. So you've got a disgusting, homophobic, offensive video released on the last day of Pride Month because, again, this is all overly determined, right? They're trying to incite a backlash. And I get that this video exists, again, for that purpose. Like, we all see what you're doing. There's nothing subtle here.
Yeah, but it did not work in DeSantis's favor. Like, it really backfired against them.
But again, even on its own terms, I think you missed the mark. My strong instinct is that even to the base, this comes across like Jeb's infamous please clap moment. Like, look at how edgy we are. On that show where Steve Cortez admits DeSantis is behind by a mile, the host did an informal and unscientific survey of his very online listeners. Oh, it's Crypto Lawyer, of course, which had Trump trouncing DeSantis by 60 points. So he's not even winning over the kind of like hyper engaged Twitter people he's targeting. And then, of course, there are costs to this kind of thing. I mean, politics is addition, not subtraction, right? It's cliche, but it's true. Many prominent LGBTQ Republicans who are at least somewhat supportive of DeSantis are now turning their backs on him. As Philip Bump points out in the Washington Post today, you can't out-conservative Trump. You can't out-MAGA him. You can't out-Trump Trump. There is no opening to run to his right on the culture war stuff. Quote,
So that's part of the problem, right? Like Ron DeSantis decided to run further to the right of Donald Trump. And I for some reason, he thought that this would be popular, that this would work across the country. And it doesn't work. And also another thing I think he needs to keep in mind, the flexing, the muscle man who's not him, and the flexing and all that kind of stuff is that I don't think he understands, and particularly if you're looking at younger people, how much of a turnoff that can be today. We live in a different time. We live in a time where when I was growing up, supermodels were like a big deal, right? Like you saw supermodels on covers, like that was a big thing. That changed, and eventually you started to see actors and actresses on those magazines instead of supermodels. Like the days of the supermodel are nothing like what they were before. You used to know these people by first name. You don't even know who they are now, right? So they're not, that went away. We live in a time now where that type of masculinity, the hyper masculinity with the muscle man and, the bodybuilder and all that kind of stuff, it's not as attractive, particularly to younger people, as it was when I was growing up. It just doesn't cut it for a lot of people today. We live in a society now where people are more about embracing different types of body image. And so that ad there, which probably would have worked like early 90s, maybe, I don't know. It doesn't work today. Even Donald Trump knows that. That's why I was saying, like, he ran to Trump's right. It's like he tried to find a way, let me be a little bit more edgier, and then that's going to put me over him. And that doesn't work. Even Trump knew there were limits. That's why he didn't go that far as DeSantis. I mean, come on, like, be wise, be wise. But again, if you look at what people actually want, and this was March of 2023, but it's still the same today. It shows you right here. In reference to the polls, the economy continues to dominate as the most important issue facing this country. That was in March. Still the same if you look at the polls today. So he just got it wrong. Oh, well, I got that music stuck in my head though now. Joe says they're gonna bring 100 more charges on Trump to balance this. I don't know. I think more charges against Donald Trump is just gonna make him even more popular. It doesn't seem to be working against him. Soul says, I live in Florida. Don't come. Thank you for the super chat, Jojo. I just thought people would like to know the CNN captioning months ago kept calling DeSantis DeSandwich. I would sooner vote for a sandwich before Biden, Trump, or DeSantis. That's interesting. I didn't notice that. And Regine says Floridians are struggling and he is MIA. Yeah, because he's on that campaign tour. I'll take the comments on Rockfin and then we'll go to the next story. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Dave. Thanks to Sabrina for the coverage tonight. And thank you, Roger. Speaking of woke, that reminds me of an interview Dave Rubin gave to Tulsi Gabbard. And he said to her, identity politics, what woke used to be called. Rubin said IDP is the most pressing threat in our lifetime, and she agreed. I said to myself, now, Tulsi, you know that ain't true. What are you doing? Anyway, if woke is your most pressing issue, then you must be doing pretty good economically. Personal safety net secured. That's a good point. I didn't think about that. And thanks for this tip as well. Who's the person with the glasses and mouth wide open that's been made into a meme? I see this person everywhere. I don't know who that person is. I know the picture you're talking about. I don't know who it is. I don't know where that picture even came from, to be honest, but I see it a lot of places. Okay. We're getting to this Marianne story now. First, I have a video clip I want to show you. Marianne actually did an interview recently on Fox News. We're going to touch on that, and then we're going to go into these allegations that are coming from a former staff member of Marianne who is dropping some revealing things. I don't know what to believe. We'll get into all of that, but I think it's something that you need to see. But first, I want to show this clip from Case Study QB. Shout out to the case. Marianne's interview on Biden skipping NATO dinner, Biden giving Ukraine cluster bombs, and why she is running. So let's get into this first clip here.
It's not the only event he's skipping. The DNC still not scheduling any debates against his Democratic challengers, including our next guest. He really doesn't have much of a campaign yet. Democratic presidential candidate Marianne Williamson joins us now. Marianne, great to see you on the couch. Good morning.
Thank you for having me.
Your reaction to the president saying, I'm going to bail on dinner last night when you meet with allies.
Well, this is a pretty important meeting. This is NATO. He's meeting with Zelensky. So if the president says, I have work to do and I want to work on with my team on my speech, I don't fault him for that.
You know, one of the things that's going on right now, there's...
No. Let me tell you why that's problematic. Hold on, let's go back. I'm going to explain to you why this is an issue.
Good morning.
Thank you for having me.
Your reaction to the president saying, I'm going to bail on dinner last night when you meet with allies.
Well, this is a pretty important meeting. This is NATO. He's meeting with Zelensky. So if the president says, I have work to do and I want to work on with my team on my speech, I don't fault him for that.
No, I don't think this was about work that Joe Biden had to do. I think this was Joe Biden having to take a break because, again, Joe Biden is experiencing cognitive decline. I believe that's why Joe Biden didn't have that meeting. He didn't show up there. Let's be real, people. Joe Biden is hiding as much as he can possibly to not make it look too suspicious to people who don't pay attention to politics every day like I do, right? So he's hiding as much as he can to possibly like get away with it without being called out for people who don't pay as close attention. But what I think really happened is I think he didn't show up because I think, again, he's experiencing cognitive decline. I think Joe Biden is having these health issues and they're trying to hide him as much as possible to prevent him from speaking more than he needs to speak, because it seems like every time he speaks or there's a press conference that he's at, he's either stumbling physically or he's stumbling mentally or he doesn't know where he is. This is happening almost every week. So I think they're trying to hide him as much as possible, and going to a dinner is going to expose him to more people. And you're going to have to talk more at a dinner. That's what I think that's really about. So I think Marianne should have, I don't know why, don't defend him. Don't defend him.
You know, one of the things that's going on right now, there's some bipartisan criticism that the administration is going to give Ukraine cluster bombs, which are outlawed in 120 different nations, except the United States, Russia, and Ukraine. What do you think about that?
I think cluster bombs should not be used. There's a reason for the Geneva Convention, for these international laws. These are bombs which could hurt innocent children, civilians for years to come.
Because they don't all detonate at once.
Pardon?
They don't all detonate.
Absolutely. And they can have terrible, terrible repercussions even after a war is over. But they should not.
But for the people who say that they don't approve of the cluster bombs, which I don't, notice, like, why can't you expand that and say, I don't agree with bombs, period? Because innocent people are still killed. Civilians are still hurt. Why can't they just expand that? Why is it still just, oh yeah, I'm going to speak out against this type of bomb? but all the other ones are all right.
Not be used.
Tell us a little bit about you, your policy, why you want to run for president, and put yourself and your family through that. We see what happens to Donald Trump, and you're running against the current president.
There are many aspects of it that are unpleasant. There's no doubt about it. But there are other aspects about it that are exhilarating. And the exhilarating part is talking to the people of the United States. I don't think the people are the problem in this country. I think we need to remember that. I think there's a political system that often does more to thwart and to suppress the voice of the people than to...
This piece right here, talking to the people of the United States, this is all I'm pointing this out for a reason, you guys, for when we get to what the former staffer said, you'll understand why I'm highlighting these moments.
That are unpleasant. There's no doubt about it. But there are other aspects about it that are exhilarating. And the exhilarating part is talking to the people of the United States.
Okay, talking to the people. Someone like Marianne Williamson doesn't have to run for president to talk to the people, though. See, that's the thing. Like, she's a best-selling author. Like, she's very well known. Like, people know who she is. She ran for president before in 2020, but she sold a lot of books. She was Oprah's spiritual advisor. Like, she doesn't have to run for president to talk to the American people. That's the thing one of the things I want you to pay attention to and hold on to that.
States. I don't think the people are the problem in this country. I think we need to remember that. I think there's a political system that often does more to thwart and to suppress the voice of the people than to facilitate the voice of the people. And that's the problem we have. I believe that we have too many legislators who, when push comes to shove, do the bidding of their own corporate donors and billionaire donors than to actually serve the health and safety and well-being of their own constituents. Even when poll after poll after poll shows what their constituents want, too many legislators go against that because of what their donors want.
All right, now let's go to the second clip here by Case.
So let's take a look at the polls right now, and the sitting president's got 64% right now. He's not really campaigning much. RFK Jr. got in, isn't really welcomed on many left-wing outlets. He's got 17%, and you have 10%. How do you expect to close the gap when the president will not engage with you?
Well, it's difficult, of course, and I think many people think that the president should engage. You have a majority of Democratic voters and Democratic-leaning voters who do want to see a debate and do want to see their options. This, to me, is about our democracy. You know, Jefferson said that the only safe...
But the question is, how are you going to engage? Let's go back to the question.
It's difficult, of course, and I think many people think that the president should engage. You have a majority of Democratic voters and Democratic-leaning...
Hold on, sorry, I didn't go back to the question. Okay, here we go.
Junior got in, isn't really welcomed on many left-wing outlets. He's got 17%, and you have 10%. How do you expect to close the gap when the president will not engage with you?
Well,
okay, how do you expect to close the gap when the president will not engage with you? That's the question. Listen to the response.
It's difficult, of course, and I think many people think that the president should engage. You have a majority of Democratic voters and Democratic-leaning voters who do want to see a debate and do want to see their options. This, to me, is about our democracy. You know, Jefferson said that the only safe repository for power is in the hands of the people. The people of the United States, particularly at a time like this, should be very aware of their options. And that's what a candidacy is. I see a campaign as a long job interview. And the voters are deciding, who am I going to hire for this job? And
so first and foremost, we'll go back just a little bit. I personally would not be quoting Thomas Jefferson. Just me. Okay? I'm not quoting Thomas Jefferson of all people, especially if you're supposed to be a progressive candidate. And then two, the question was, how do you expect to close the gap? She's gone into history about what Thomas Jefferson said. She's talked about what the voters want, that we need to respect the democracy. But I didn't hear her answer that question.
Is in the hands of the people. The people of the United States, particularly at a time like this, should be very aware of their options. And that's what a candidacy is. I see a campaign as a long job interview. And the voters are deciding, who am I going to hire for this job? And the president should debate his opponents. He absolutely should.
And
didn't answer the question, guys. So what does that tell you about the strategy and the plan? How do you expect to close the gap? How can you answer that question? So I would say, well, I plan to travel all across this country, not just to states that are the early primary states, but to every state in this country. By the way, that's what Bernie Sanders did to get my voice out as much as possible. I plan on to go on to as many media outlets that will have me there. I plan on going out in the street and participating in some of these strikes that are happening right now. There's a writer's strike, there's an actor's strike, there's a hotel strike, there's Cop City. I plan on visiting those actions as well and getting the word out. We're going to have to hit the pavement. That's just one way to answer the question. How do you expect to close the gap? Not giving people a history lesson about what Thomas Jefferson said or going into what voters want to have a debate. Those are things people already know. What people don't know is how you expect to close that gap, which is why they asked that question. So she didn't answer that, and hold on to that because all of this is going to make sense in a second.
It's a job where only one person gets the job and you want it. Joe Biden says he is absolutely fit to be president of the United States when it comes to his age and mental acuity and things like that. Do you think so?
Well, you know, for me, even if he was at the top of his game, I think I'm a better candidate. Even if he was at the top of his game, I think I have better policies, I have a better agenda for the next 4 years, and I think I'm a better person to face the Republicans in 2024.
Do you think he's too old?
You know, I don't want to get ageist about it. You know, we all know this because, look, Trump is, 2 years younger, I think. Every person has to look at that and choose for themselves. We've all seen the gaffes. And also, his team.
This is how you know that she's not really going to fight. Because even Hillary Clinton said in an interview recently when she was asked that question, yes, his age is an issue. Hillary Clinton said that. Hillary Clinton wasn't afraid to call that out. And she's not running. So for Marianne, if you're trying to convince people that you're going to push and fight for the people, you got to be willing to call out Joe Biden. And you have to be willing to say, yeah, you know, I think Joe Biden's having some serious mental issues. We've all seen the video footage. This is not something that someone needs to be shy about answering unless that is not the goal that Marianne has in mind. Hold on to that piece.
Gaffes. And also, his team says, well, when it comes to decision making, he does fine. I feel that I have plenty to challenge the president on based on serious fundamental disagreements on policy. I don't need to go there.
Marianne, if anybody's watching, they'd like more.
Listen to what she said his team said. This is important, guys. Because I'm showing you something here.
About it. You know, we all know this because, look, Trump is, 2 years younger, I think. Every person has to look at that and choose for themselves. We've all seen the gaffes. And also, his team says, well, when it comes to decision making, he does fine.
So now all of a sudden we believe what Joe Biden's team says? Marianne's run for president before. She knows how this works. Now all of a sudden we're supposed to take the Biden team at their word. Why is she being so nice to the Biden administration now?
I feel that I have plenty to challenge the president on based on serious fundamental disagreements on policy. I don't need to go there.
Marianne, if anybody's watching, they'd like more information or to donate, what's your website?
Thank you. Marianne2024.com.
All right, Marianne. Thank you very much.
Thank
you. Simone, the goal is a cabinet seat or a VP. And this is something I've been wondering for quite some time. And recently, there was a former staffer of Marianne that released some information that, by the way, I did contact Jeremy Elwood. Both myself and JB did. We reached out to him to try to get him to come onto the JB and Sabby show on RBN. We did not hear back from him. So just FYI, we did reach out, but did not hear back. And also, when I went to look at his Facebook page again, that Facebook post is not there anymore. But there's always screenshots. Now, DSA Preskin shared this. There were other people who shared it too. Ignore any tweets that I've thrown in the direction of Marianne Williamson. I don't fuck with people who turn their backs on the working poor of this country. Marianne fires anyone who suggests focusing on ballot access in states. She has a book out in September, Do the Math. Now, this is someone who supported Marianne. Let's see what Jeremy Elwood said. Now, Jeremy, let me go in a little bit bigger because there we go. So you guys can see it. Jeremy was a former staffer. So just listen to this. This post was on Facebook. This is not a Twitter post. It was on Facebook. It was on his Facebook page. I saw it myself, checked it again the next day after that. The post was gone. So he took a screenshot of this and posted this on Twitter. Jeremy goes on to say, Marianne Williamson, her campaign is not a campaign. It is a book tour. Here's how I know. I was the national field director. I was fired along with anyone who mentioned ballot access or field plan. This is really interesting. Her focus is only on events and social media. Now, this piece here, it is a book tour. I seem to remember my comrades at RBN saying that very early on, that that's what this was really about. I was half joking a month ago that this is a book tour. I found out on the day that I was fired that she has a book coming out in September. We're going to check that in just a second. When I brought up in a staff call that we still don't have ballot access in any state, she literally called ballot access mythical stuff. Okay. Myself, National Field Director, and my partner, Field Strategist, were let go after we toiled to make a solid national field plan and had to pivot to political director roles to fill gaps so we could finish the field plan. Give me 1 second. Just gotta. Spill the tea, Jeremy. Sorry, I'm a little stuffy. Let me turn on the fan. Okay. We weren't allowed to complete our roles because of mythical stuff. So apparently, him simply bringing up the ballot access issue, which he alleges that Marianne said that was mythical stuff, apparently that cost him to lose his position. There's more. Marianne has fired those who know how to make a campaign win and has kept and promoted those who are only event and social media aware. Book tour. Again, she has, whoops, how did I go? Where did I go? Sorry, I moved up too far. Again, she has no ballot access and she fired everyone who has any semblance of field. So let me explain the field part. So as part of campaigns, there are the people that are in the field and there are people that kind of do the desk work. I don't know if that's what you want to call it, but it is what it is. But the people in the field are the people who really, they hit the ground running. They're the ones that mobilize the grassroots. So Bernie's campaign was excellent with that, right? AOC's campaign was really good with that. They had the people in the field. Those are the people that really help get the typical non-voters to come out and support those like progressive campaigns, right? Like that's how they get them to come out and win. So the field game, or some people call it the on the ground game, is very important. If you don't have that, you have nothing. I mean, you have to have that, especially if you're running a grassroots campaign. Again, she has no ballot access and she doesn't care. Calls ballot access mythical stuff. She fired everyone who has any semblance of field. She promoted New Hampshire State Director to campaign manager. His name is Carlos. So this is where I can chime in. I'm familiar with Carlos. Actually, he was on Brianna Joy Gray interviewed him early on. It was him and another, I forget the other guy, but both of them were a part of Marianne's campaign. But I knew about Carlos because he ran for office before. He's north of me in New Hampshire. He was actually he was supposed to be a speaker at our Boston Medicare for All campaign. So he was on one of the lists, things like that. He has no experience with national campaign, right? And this is not to say you have to be perfect in every way. People have their strengths. But I did find it to be a little strange that if you're running for president, the person that you chose to be the campaign manager after the other two left, okay, this is campaign manager number 3, is someone who has no experience with national campaigns. I found that to be kind of strange. His name is Carlos. He knows nothing about national campaigns. By the way, I've only worked on nationals for the past 8 years. So Jeremy has worked on national campaigns for 8 years. Nor has he any experience in the field, which is what it takes to reach voters. I told you. He goes on to say, Marianne is a grifter. Do not support her. She is here to sell her book coming out in September, and that is all she is here for. If she wanted to win, she would listen to the multitude of experts that were on her campaign before she fired them for giving advice and direction. And here I pause because I go back to the clip that we had of Marianne yelling at Marcel Dixon when he tried to correct her on the dollar amount for reparations. I don't think she realized at that time that he not only was running for office, but he's also a reparations activist. And she was wrong. And he pulled up receipts on Twitter to show her that she was incorrect. He did have his numbers right. He knew what he was talking about. But I looked at the way that she charged back towards him and was like, you don't know. And I was like, whoa, what is happening here? That was a bit much. All that charisma, all that went right out the window. I was like, whoa, honey, a little bit of heat. And just like that. So that's kind of what this reminds me of. This thing right here, fired them for giving advice and direction. I worked for her, and I'm all the more sad for it because I was duped. I thought I was more aware than that. Go ahead, Marianne. Shoot me a cease and desist because I will do neither. Your campaign has no hold because you're a grifting fraud. Well, damn. Now there's more because Matthew, who shared that, went on to say, we suffer, we have no money. We look at good policy like it's the last loaf of bread from the rotation truck. Working Americans don't deserve to be conned or played like this. F this country. Marianne is only showing her true colors when the curtains close. To any Marianne volunteer I've chatted with and found progressive community with, I think you are all great either way, but I can't continue to support a rich woman's lies. Important side note for anyone who supports Biden, I'm not here to join Biden in his fake conquests either. For anyone who's wondering about extra details, Marianne, how about you pay your former employees? Honey. So this is also, again, a Facebook comment from Jeremy. P.S. Still waiting for the $400 expense payout and the $6,000 severance payout. So it sounds like to me, Jeremy is alleging that Marianne owes him some money. And not just chump change. Note, this is not me as a disgruntled employee. I was fired on June 30th. I would have made this a lot sooner if it were just me being disgruntled. This is me being sickened by seeing that she's taken advantage of supporters while I know it has nothing to do with the campaign. She's using the money to sell a book. End of story. To clarify, even if Marianne isn't campaigning as a book tour, it doesn't change that she is firing employees who bring up good ideas and then not paying them severance. Burning the path you walk on isn't a sign of integrity in your mission. Okay. By the way, this person here, let me show you something. This Helen person, I don't believe any of that for a second. Obviously, ballot access is essential, and we were dedicated to securing it on the last campaign. Nothing would have changed for this one. Let me show you something. See, you got to check people, right? So watch this. When you look at Helen's profile, digital director for Marianne 2020. So there's that. Let's go back. Matthew went on to say, I've been told recently from former staff that they have had the same experience as Jeremy. I get where you're coming from, though. And then this person said, do you watch? Dickie McGeezek says, do you watch RBM? Now, about the book. Colin found it. So this is Colin from Indie News Network. Colin said, I guess this confirms what Jeremy Elwood tweeted. R.E. Marianne Williamson's campaign is nothing more than a book tour. And if you look here, it says The Mystic Jesus, The Mind of Love, September 12th, 2023 by Marianne Williamson. So Jeremy was telling the truth that she has a book coming out in September. So for people saying he's trying to lie, according to this, it's right there. Okay. So now we need to talk about this because this speaks to another issue. Politico had wrote about this. Marianne keeps bleeding staff. 6 more depart in internal feud. The staffers left through a round of firings and resignations. And then I just want to highlight one piece here. The departures came primarily over a fight about Williamson's ballot access operations or lack thereof. The campaign's entire 3-person South Carolina operation, which had been led by Mercurius Byrd, resigned. According to 4 people with knowledge of the campaign operations and team discussions, granted anonymity to discuss internal dynamics. In addition, Carlos Cardona, that's gentleman from New Hampshire I was telling you about, who was recently promoted to head the campaign after serving as New Hampshire state director, fired 2 national field directors and a member of Williamson's New Hampshire team, according to those same people. One of the 4, who is a current staffer, attributed the changes to Cardona stepping in as new campaign manager and just his approach to reorganizing and restructuring the campaign to be cash efficient, but also incredibly nimble on the ground in key primary states. I don't know about being cash efficient, but I know it sounds like some people haven't been paid. It sounds like someone needs to cut a check. Like, let's be clear here. I'm going to tell you what I think is really happening. We kind of predicted this on RBN, that this was the feeling that we were getting from this, that it didn't feel like it was really, it didn't feel genuine. It did not feel genuine, right? So it looks some kind of way, man. You announce you're running for president. Now you got a book coming out in September. It's just, even if the book doesn't bother you, let's put the book aside for a second. What about these people not being paid? We need to talk about that. What about that? Now, again, Jeremy Elwood, that tweet is gone. That Facebook post is gone now from his page. So I don't know. I don't know what happened with Jeremy, but maybe he got contacted by enough people to the point where he was like, I'm going to take this down. Of course, it was too late by then because people already had the screenshots. But what I'm saying is that this is a problem. This is a big problem. Again, for those just joining, I did invite Jeremy on. Me and JB did. We invited him on for the JB and Sabby show on RBN. We did not hear back from him. So I was hoping to be able to hear from him directly. But I don't know what to tell you guys other than the fact that it looks a little sus. It looks a little suspicious. Because I haven't heard of anybody else losing all these campaign people. You heard anybody else losing all these people? Has RFK Jr. lost all these campaign staffers and campaign managers? No, Diz Kucinich is still his campaign manager. Like, this is a lot. So early on. So early on. And if this is the case, like for people who were the people who I asked you to run, what Kyle Kalinske said at Marianne, we asked you to run, we want you to run. How do they feel about this? I don't know, man. I do not know. If you have not had a chance to do so, go ahead and smash that like button. We'll talk about this on Call-In tonight because it is a doozy. I'm telling you. We'll talk about this, the FBI director, other stories as well. Matt Miller says, how does Biden have 64%? I don't know. I told you guys I don't even believe that number. I don't even believe it. Katie said he probably signed an NDA. So if he signed an NDA, maybe that's why he deleted it. Thank you for the super chat, Roger. Sabby spilling the tea as she is spilling the tea. That's funny. Thank you for this as well, Roger. Mythical stuff. He should have said, so was your campaign. Thank you for the super chat, Michael. Think Dr. West isn't running as an author too. I don't think Dr. West needs to do that though. That's the thing. Like Dr. West just sells on his own, like book wise. He doesn't need to run for president to write a book. She could have also tried to be a little bit more discreet about it too. Like the book coming out in September. Brian, Crystal and Kyle should be ashamed for shilling this grifter on us. No, but when we tried to tell people early on, we were like, yeah, we're not feeling this. Like we got heavily attacked. People were like, how dare you go against the one person who's challenging Joe Biden? I was like, first of all, it's early on. You don't know if anybody else is going to join this race. Second of all, Marianne was horrible on Israel-Palestine, just like RFK Jr. is horrible on Israel-Palestine. You know, there were other issues with it. And no, like, it didn't seem genuine, man. I told you it did not seem genuine. You get vibes and shit sometimes from people. Okay, I have a quick update in reference to Ohio. If you live in Ohio, this is especially important to you. I already covered the Ohio ballot initiatives, but there has been an update recently, and this applies to a special election that's happening in August and how this may affect you. So I'm going to come to this really quick, and I'll take a break, and then we'll do call-in. Update in reference to Ohio. An Ohio proposal will ask voters during an August special election to boost the threshold for passing constitutional amendments to 60% rather than a simple majority. Now, they tried to do this to South Dakota, did not work. They tried to make it so that South Dakota has to have 60% in reference to a ballot measure actually passing in order for it to pass, which means it's not majority rule. So like if 52% said yes and the rest say no, it doesn't pass because it wasn't 60%. You know, they think they're slick, but it did not pass in South Dakota, so they still were able to keep it as it is. Let's hope this does not happen to Ohio. It would also double the number of counties where signatures must be collected, adding an extra layer of difficulty to qualifying initiatives for the ballot. Ohio issue 1 60% vote requirement to approve constitutional amendments measure. Misty's in Ohio. I'm going to send this to her. A yes vote support requiring a 60% majority from voters to approve a constitutional amendment. The official ballot title is as follows: The proposed amendment would require that any proposed amendment to the Constitution of the state of Ohio receive the approval of at least 60% of eligible voters voting on the proposed amendment. Require that any initiative petition filed on or after January 1st, 24, with the Secretary of State proposing to amend the Constitution of the state of Ohio be signed by at least 5% of eligible voters of all 88 counties in the state. Double the amount of 44 counties that is required now. Specify the additional signatures may not be added in an initiative petition filed with the Secretary of State on or after January 1st, 24, proposing to amend Constitution of the state of Ohio. So if you live in Ohio in August, don't skip out on that special election. Even if you go to vote just to answer that question, just go to answer that question. So that way you don't let them do this to you. Because if you let them raise this to that 60%, it's going to be more difficult for you guys to pass ballot measures, right? So I don't care. You don't have to vote for any of those candidates, but at least show up to vote for that ballot measure question. And I have one more piece here that Roger wanted me to shout out. Of course, it was supported by the Republican Party, right? So this piece here, Republican State Representative Brian Stewart said that all 88 counties should have a voice in determining what amendments make it on the ballot and eliminate the cumbersome cure period, which gives initiative petitions effectively a do-over when they fail to meet the requirements for ballot access. This is a note here from Roger. Seeing that the legislator is applying the same standard to the voters as they apply to themselves, where all is required is 60% of both chambers in one session to pass the amendment before putting it before the voters for ratification. That is when it comes to legislative initiative amendments. And now they're asking voters to match their high threshold standard. I would actually vote for this, except the fact that they have increased the distribution requirement to get signatures from 44 counties to all 88 counties. Either have a high threshold for voter ratification, but no distribution requirement, or have a distribution requirement, but simple majority to pass and ratify. Don't make it too hard. Don't make it too easy. So for those of you, and I want to put this link in the chat, because if you're in Ohio, don't sleep on this. You see this? It says GOP state lawmakers try to restrict ballot initiatives. So let me put this in the chat. You gotta be, this is why we have to pay attention to these things happening on the local level. So Roger, thank you so much for giving me the update, because I had already covered Ohio, but things change, right? All right, I'm going to take a quick break. I'll come back and we'll jump on Colin. Whee!
Better unmute my microphone. All right. Yeah, talking about ballot measures. Definitely get in there and vote for those ballot measures. It's really our purest form of democracy. All right, this is the part of the show where we give Sabrina a little break before we're going to go into the call-in. Let's take a peek at what our call-in's going to be tonight. It'll be an FBI director, Marianne, and more. Whatever you want to talk about on call-in, you can do that. You can get into call-in by hitting the link in your browser. Let me throw that in the chat. And Sabrina will likely pin that as the pin chat. You can do call-in on your browser. You can do call-in on your cell phone. And we want to hear from you on the call-in. That'll be coming up in a little while when Sabrina comes back. Let's see. Let me move this back out. This over here. We had a couple of new super chats come in. Thanks, Matt Miller, for the super sticker. Appreciate that. And thanks for this super chat. From Leprechaun Alley. This tells me that they are very worried about the left succeeding, that they are putting up barriers as soon as possible. Yeah, well, you know that it's well, I mean, both parties serve capital, serve money, and it's really more about keeping that status quo in place, keeping all these candidates, both parties. It's all corporate. It's all in service of the billionaires, in service of their tools, the mega corporations, and that's how you really know. You really know a candidate's real if they're talking about that. If they're talking about the money, if they're talking about the corporations. One of the other stories we had tonight was about the FBI director Christopher Wray getting grilled in front of Congress, and one of the things it made me think of is like what we're kind of seeing there is it's theater. I mean, of course, none of these Republicans are really serious about standing up for real people or for anyone other than their donor owners. What we do see is kind of an elite, Game of Thrones style infighting. And what I think, those of us here on the real left we should think about leveraging that. We should think about while the red and the blue are fighting each other and doing the usual theater battles, what we want to do is while they're distracted doing that, we have a candidate like a Dr. West, like a Jill Stein, kind of swoop in there, in the fray while they're busy doing that. Because, I think there is I think there's an opening there when you have this kind of elite infighting where, they will bash each other. You have different groups, you have different camps, you have kind of like Silicon Valley on one side, you can have like the bankers and the energy companies on the other side. And, I think it's possible to have them kind of go at each other and knock each other down to the extent that a real leftist candidate could come in there. And and because the biggest thing in all this is the biggest thing that they need to keep in place is the propaganda and the narrative that that it's left and right, it's culture war issues. I mean, that's what Desantis is trying to ride, like he's trying to ride these kind of culture war issues, he thinks, all the way, and it's not really, it's just not really happening. There was one other little thing I wanted to bring up to just quickly here. There was a recent it was in a Caitlin Johnstone column. Hopefully I can, here we go, I brought it up, and she mentioned, in I think this is the most recent one, and it's titled "Profit." This is Caitlin Johnstone. This is "Profit-Driven Systems Are Driving Us to Our Doom," and she talks about this device called Instant Pot that was a big hit, and it was this kind of combination pressure cooker, slow cooker. It could do these 7-in-1 things, and it was a big hit, and it was all the rage, and they sold a whole bunch of them. But then now the company's going bankrupt. And the reason the company is going bankrupt is because the product was too good. The product was too well made. They tended to kind of last forever. And so once people bought them, they didn't funnel any more money to the company. And this is how our capitalist system, how it works now, is that if you don't have a constant growth, if you don't have a constant new product and whatnot, then you get eaten up, because that's what capitalism needs. That's how it operates. And so she says, just think about that for a second. Under our current systems for profit generation, which is the primary driver of human behavior on this planet, making a quality product that lasts a long time instead of quickly going obsolete or turning into landfill will actually drive you into bankruptcy. Did you hear about this one with the Instapot?
Yeah, that one doesn't surprise me though, because
it was too good.
Right after you bought it, there was nothing else for you to, once you had it, you had it.
Yep, not in this system.
A lot of people were on that craze, man. I remember that.
All right,
Colin. My mom was like, "It's just a pressure cooker. I already have one of those things." It's just, yeah. Okay.
All right,
It's
Colin,
call-in
tonight.
time.
We'll see you in there.
All right. Yeah. So call in, guys. This is episode 116. FBI director. We can talk about that. Marianne, former staffer, and more. Let's discuss the FBI director testimony, Marianne's former staffer claim, and more. So I will see you guys over there. The link is pinned to the top of the chat. Let me just double check really quick. Yep. The link is pinned to the top of the chat. So let's head on over to call in, and I'll be back tomorrow night. Ravinus is still on Instapot. Love. Oh, I love mine. Oh, you still got it? Yeah. I know a couple people, like, they bought them and they were really into it when they first got it. And then they just, over time, they stopped using it. It's interesting how that happens, right? Oh, well. Let's head on over to call in, guys. You know how we do this. Have a good night.